final draft. And we've also asked them to include, per the request of Siouxland District Health, to include some information in those plans on healthy lifestyles and community wellness. So, but for the most part, they're plugging away. They're meeting with towns. And I asked if they thought that there were any challenges related to the planning process with these, with Woodbury County footing 100% of the bill. I said, do you think it's got anything to do with the city's not really having any financial skin in the game? And he assured me that just with the smaller communities, these are just sort of inherent challenges that they have with getting folks to actually come and participate in public meetings. So. Mm-hmm. Supervisors, have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. With the comprehensive plans, are there actionable steps that are some of the things that those communities might be able to take that are kind of the low-hanging fruit and identified timelines? Is that part of what their next steps are?
Yes, so in finalizing the actual final product, they are having individual work sessions with city councils, planning and zoning commissions, and other key stakeholder groups to sort of identify a project priority list. And I'm hoping that what we'll be able to do is use that list as a catalyst with our other project with SIMPCO, and give SIMPCO planning staff some stuff to work on.
And then do you plan to share a copy of each of those, or ask the councils if we can get a copy of each of those final products so that we can be aware?
Yes, absolutely. I intend to attend each of the city council meetings where they formally adopt the comp plan, and then I'll, of course, share the finished product with you folks.
Thank you.
I think it'd be interesting to contrast it with, was it in 2016, you did a survey of all the communities to see what their challenges were and what their desires were as far as growth and specific industries. So we can see if that's shaped their process or if it's the same.
And again, I think, another actionable step that the county can be looking at in the future would be, once we have all the comp plans for all the cities, and of course the city of Sioux City is undergoing a comp plan as we speak, I think it would probably serve the county well to update our general development plan, future land use map, and so forth. So.
Very good. Any other thoughts? And item B for information as well is a fourth quarter and final update on the SIMPCO City County Membership Dues Project.
So I have here in the audience tonight Michelle Bostonellis, the Executive Director for SIMPCO. This, of course, was our last quarterly report, and she's going to provide some comments on the last quarter as well as a summary evaluation of the last year. You'd like to take it over?
Hello.
Hey, welcome.
In your packet, you will see our fourth quarter report here, which kind of followed the same format as the last one, so you can kind of compare things. We did spend approximately 88 direct hours working with the Woodbury County communities this last quarter, which is about $5,984, and estimate about almost 80 hours of kind of indirect time. We've talked about that before. That's just the general committees. Work that SIMPCO does that we're representing the county at those meetings, and that's about another $5,000 worth of work there. If you kind of flip through the report there, I guess I'll kind of highlight on a few of the fourth quarter notes. One of the most successful projects, I think, for this whole fiscal year has been in Lawton. We were actually able to get a grant for them through the Iowa Department of Public Health, $10,000 grant to complete a sidewalk segment. And they also identified some faucets to be installed in their community garden, and that project was completed this last quarter, so that was great. Another thing that we did in the last quarter is we offered a training regarding the fireworks, the new fireworks legislation. There was a lot of kind of confusion, and it came out to cities really fast about what the new legislation was. So we had Sarah Kleber from Heidemann Law Firm gave a presentation and offered assistance to those communities to kind of trying to figure out what they need to do to be compliant with that when the 4th of July rolled around. So that we got great feedback on that. other things here I think I'll kind of highlight. Probably, you know, we talked about this at the last meeting, is kind of the overall what the tangible benefits were for the whole entire fiscal year. You know, again, I mentioned the Iowa Department of Public Health grant for Lawton. In the fourth quarter, we also found out that Lawton received a Wellmark match grant for a trail for $25,000. So during the fourth quarter, we assisted them on that. As you know, Sergeant Bluff and the county itself applied for surface transportation block grant funds through our MPO process and RPA process, and we're awarded through that. I mentioned the fireworks ordinance training, but we also had a TIF urban renewal training during that time period where John Danos came from Des Moines. That's a subject that is, it's a difficult subject to get your head around, and so it's great that John offered that training to our members. Danbury, we did come up with a priority project list for them, and I think that's something, you know, all the communities can benefit from. I do think that their comprehensive plans will also provide that list, but sometimes it's nice to have kind of, okay, what are our short-term goals and long-term goals? So let's kind of see what comes out of the comp plan. Hornick, we did do a city logo for them, and I was just looking at the survey. It looks like for some reason they didn't receive their city logo. We were kind of having a little bit of issues with emails going back and forth, so I'll have staff follow up with them. The logo was complete, but maybe for some reason an email didn't get through or something. So we did complete a city logo for Hornick. We assisted Smithland, Odo, and Hornick in their budget preparations. They have to submit annual finance report and city budget, so they utilize SIMPCO staff with that. Odo wrote several grants for them, a MERD grant and another farm credit service grant. Sergeant Bluff, Lawton, and Bronson did a lot of work on Safe Routes to School. We did several walking audits, bike rodeos, Safe Routes to School plans. They're kind of really working on those projects. Sergeant Bluff, we don't notice the Federal Rec Trails application assistance, but of course Sergeant Bluff's part of our metropolitan area, so you know they kind of get put in with all of our MPO work in terms of our transportation improvement program and our long-range transportation plan and some of our other committees. Salix, they received a cost-benefit analysis study for their water sewer project, and we also did work with them a little bit on just questions they had about possible annexation. From what we have heard from our communities, we had sent out membership dues letters, you know, back in June. Bronson, Hornick, Lawton, Odo, Smithland, and Sergeant Bluff have, you know, indicated to us that they want to continue with membership. Things that I know we have coming up in 2018, assisting Odo with another MERD grant. Bronson has contacted us about additional funding for their generator, continuing to work with Lawton, Sergeant Bluff on Safe Routes to School, trail grants. Again, there was always lots of MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, and regional planning affiliation transportation work and what comes with that to make sure that transportation dollars are still flowing to the area. So working on that. And then, you know, we assume that our communities like Smithland and Odo and possibly Hornick will always need budget assistance that we're, you know, happy to offer them. So, you know, it was probably a little bit less in the fourth quarter here than earlier, I think, with hours. I do think, again, I will say that I think getting these comp plans done and when the communities have that list of projects and recommendations, and they're going to be able to really run with things. Without that foresight, it's hard for them to know even where to start. Some communities definitely, like, you know, we have Lawton and they really have a good trail plan and they know what they want to do, so it's fairly easy to get in there, work with the committee, write a grant, and be successful at that. So, you know, as the communities work through their comp plan process, you know, hopefully some more of those types of projects will surface to the top, and then SIMPCO can really run with them. You know, I always try to promote to our SIMPCO members that we're not just consultants. We're not, you know, a lot of our work is comparable to consultants, and we do a lot of the same work consultants do, but when they pay members into SIMPCO, they're really buying into the region. They're investing into the Siouxland region. They get to participate on the SIMPCO board and make regional decisions. They get to participate in our legislative activities. They get to be part of something bigger. So I understand that they could go to any consultant to receive a lot of these works, but hopefully they understand that it's an investment in the region and showing the support and the strength of our region.
Mr. Taylor, you had a question?
I'll save it for the next item, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle.
Any thoughts? Thank you. We are on to item 8C, which is approval, evaluation, and recommendation of SIMPCO City County Membership Dues Project.
So essentially, piggybacking off of the last quarter report and annual summary, I did survey the 8 cities that participated in this planning project over the last year. When I sent my agenda backup materials to the board, I was lacking one city, Hornick. I didn't have a response on the survey. I did get their response just yesterday, so I do have updated reports that I'll share with the board. And I could also give to Karen for the record. But overall, the responses were favorable in terms of their satisfaction with SIMPCO and their planning staff. And I guess I would just reiterate the fact that, you know, for Woodbury County, we invested $4,200, $4,288. And SIMPCO was able to leverage that money into $50,694 of direct and indirect costs. So I feel like the return on the county's investment in providing the cities with technical assistance, which they identified in that survey that Chairman Ung referenced just a few minutes ago, I feel like that's pretty good bang for the buck. And in terms of, you know, Michelle just made a comment about the services that they provide are the same sort of services that private consultants offer. These cities would probably more than likely pay a lot more for private sector services than our regional council of governments. And for those in the audience or those that may be watching, I would just remind everybody that SIMPCO serves over 75 local governments in our region, special districts, school districts, nonprofit organizations within the tri-state area. They are also our metropolitan planning organization, and they work to provide long-range planning, community development activities, and professional regional program management to help foster, you know, intelligent economic development and smart planning principles. And so, you know, in other parts of the state, and I've said this before, the Council of Governments are utilized very heavily, and I feel like we underutilize them. And as Michelle just mentioned, you know, being a dues-paying member also gets you a seat at the SIMPCO board, and that's something that I'd really like to encourage, because if you look at, like, say, the city of Sergeant Bluff, you can see that they're more well-versed in terms of what their service capabilities are. So I think they're taking advantage of those capabilities. Some of the feedback that I got from some of the rural cities that were in this project last year, I feel like maybe over-relied on SIMPCO to help them figure out what they should be working on. And we came, Michelle and I, to all the cities in the beginning of the project to help sort of come up with some ideas on things that they should, you know, they can be working on. But it's sort of like the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and if you don't call, then I guess you assume that they don't need anything. Part of my recommendation is to continue to offer to pay half of the dues, but along with that, I would like to put some requirements from SIMPCO and a commitment of myself to basically follow up with the cities at least once every quarter to find out, you know, hey, what can we be helping you working on? What are you working on right now? You know, here's some grant opportunities. I felt like the emails that SIMPCO sends out with the grant blast to let them know, like, these are the grants that are out there right now, these are the due dates. You know, that's a good thing. I think that the project priority list is something that we should incorporate if we continue to do this. And basically, all I mean is that we sit down with the council and we say, you know, what would you like us to work on? And then we just whittle away at that list. So,
Mr. Taylor.
Hey, Mr. Chair, is there much crosstalk between Simmering Corny with the long-term comprehensive plans and SIMPCO? Is that information sharing?
Not really at this point, because they're still in the process of you know, finalizing the vision of the community and working on cataloging data on the infrastructure capacities and those sorts of things. But I actually had a phone conversation with Justin today and mentioned the fact that I hope we continue to offer, to provide financial assistance to cities, because some of the cities did say that, if the councils didn't get some financial assistance, they might not want to continue. So I would like to have some cross-communication and more coordination with them, especially with the communities that are, finalizing their comp plans.
So you anticipate afterwards that those communities would have that comprehensive plan and then be able to come to Michelle and her group and say, help us to execute?
Yes, the city
Some of
clerk
these.
in Hornick I spoke with yesterday, and she said, well, our fear is that we're going to have this comp plan, but then we don't have the financial resources to do anything that's identified. And that's the challenge, I think, for Michelle and her planning staff will be to go out and seek, funding opportunities to accomplish some projects. So, again, for $4,200 to leverage that into nearly $51,000, it's a good return.
Well, it's a success overall because the communities have skin in the game, and it's the board's commitment. It's actionable that, we're investing in areas outside of Sioux City, and I think we should continue to do that as long as they're willing to take us up on it. And once the comprehensive plans are done, well, then there's a lot of other services they can delve into that they might not have already.
So with that, my recommendation would be to send me back and request another proposal from SIMPCO to continue this for another year. And again, we can reevaluate it at the end of the fiscal year and see where we go from there.
I'd so move.
Second.
Second by Taylor. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Thank you, David. Item 9 is from Building Services Director Kenny Schmitz. Includes item A for action. This is approval of Woodbury County Courthouse sub-basement columns deterioration emergency repair. I've had the distinct pleasure of visiting these sites and can attest to the need for this agenda item to be before us.
The item for you is to address the deterioration in the southeast sub-basement of the courthouse. We've got some significant deterioration. We asked Raker Roads to come in and give us their perspective and an evaluation of what kind of repair that we've got, or what kind of a repair we're looking at before us, whether it's something that's deteriorated over the many years and may continue to deteriorate over several more years, or if it's something we need to address on a faster scale. Tonight I have with us Eric Raker with Raker Roads Engineering. I'd like Eric to come up and explain a little bit about what he's seen. He did provide Matthew Ung, the board chair, a letter requesting that this be deemed an emergency repair. Eric?
Kind of my first time doing this, so I'm gonna blunder through this a little bit. But so there's some columns that are concrete columns that are deteriorating. They're going to continue to deteriorate. I think it's probably a good idea to get on fixing those as soon as possible. Here to answer it. Have you seen the images of the area?
They're in our backup materials.
I've visited, but what method do you propose to repair that or to stabilize it, let's say?
We've created a detail that we've identified.
All right.
Basically, chipping away the existing damaged concrete down to the sound areas, replacing a jacket of new concrete over it. It's fairly straightforward.
Okay.
What sort of scope of possibility are we dealing with? I know if you only need to go so far into the ceiling, you will, but what are we looking at here?
Well, that is something that's hard to determine in a repair in an old building. It's one of the difficult items to quantify cost-wise. It's a difficult item to identify just how long it's going to take and how far when you start chipping away at something when you're going to find something solid. We've done some preliminary work and done our best guess. Best estimate that we can about how damaged is. that's why a good contractor with the ability to have some flexibility can fix it and fix it right. This is Shane.
Down there, there's 4 columns. Of the 4 columns, there's 2 that are fairly, that are a little worse than the other ones. So what Kenny and I talked about, what we'll do is, we'll go into one that's not as extensive as the other ones, chip away, see what it takes to get the rust blasted off, get the epoxy recoated, so we can get an idea of what it's gonna cost per linear foot of replacement. So that way, we can come back to you and say, hey, this is all gonna be about this. Right now, the spitball number that Kenny and I have worked with is about, let's start with $50,000. We think, and I think hopefully that's gonna cover it, but we won't know until we actually get one done. And then I can report back to the board after one's complete. Hey, we're on track, this is gonna be about this. You know, hopefully maybe it's only 20,000 or whatever that number is. But until we spend the time to tear into one, to see what it's gonna take to put it back and how far it goes.
Karen, if you could you put the pictures from the back of material on the screen? And Mr. Taylor, you had something?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So my question is, I hate that we keep getting these emergency repairs, but I think it's through no fault of our own and many years without addressing some of these needs, including the steam traps, which would have contributed to this.
Absolutely.
So my question is, once these repairs are in place, how does one go about monitoring so that it doesn't become to such a degree that it's going to cost 3 times or 4 times what it otherwise wouldn't if you had conducted maintenance and preventative measures? Does that question make sense?
It does. The fix that we're proposing is going to do our best to contain the visible damage that we know of now, right? You're in a 100-ish-year-old building, and it's going to have maintenance on the structure, from tuck pointing on the exterior to a variety of other items, right? We're going to address the items that we see now that are noticeably damaged are the ones that we're going to address now. So does that answer your question?
I guess, is there a way to monitor? I know in other portions on the exterior, we're monitoring those conditions to see where we're at.
Sure, sorry to interrupt. But this is going to essentially be a jacket.
Okay.
A jacket, we're going to pour new, chip away the old concrete, clean up the rebar, fish in some new rebar, and then encase the rest with new concrete. Once it's done, that should be a condition that lasts. Time is not something that we like to really get involved with, but for a long time, you should be able to address this. This is not a quick fix. This is intended to be the long-term fix that should stabilize this area for quite some time.
Thank you.
Kenny, when we speak about emergency repair and the possibility of funding it ahead of, approving funding ahead of a fiscal budget cycle, I think it's important to communicate the seriousness of the issue to the public. What can you say there as far as why you wouldn't recommend this just to be part of our normal budget process?
I agree. Part of our normal budget process, I guess, would cause us a timeline that couldn't be handled through, or in a timely manner to achieve an emergency repair. Our normal budget process takes time. It happens at a certain part of a year, so we would have to wait for that particular part of the year to get that on the CIP process. In this instance, or any emergency instance, it's a time frame that we feel that we can't wait upon to take action due to the circumstances that could be involved with waiting.
What office sits above the 2 most damaged columns?
The Board of Supervisors office.
That's not the reason that we're...
Doesn't it also catch the auditor's office? I think
That's why we're concerned.
That's why we're meeting in the basement, everybody. We just want to be really safe.
And so our hope today, or what we're asking for today, is a motion to proclaim this an emergency repair, and the second motion would be to approve the Rager Roads engineering report and funding to do site visits throughout a project reconstruction.
I'd move to proclaim and approve funding of an emergency repair to the courthouse sub-basement columns identified as Woodbury County Courthouse sub-basement columns emergency repair project.
I'll second the motion by Taylor. Discussion. We're also presented with the logistical nightmare of the sub-basement, aren't we?
We are. We've had one contractor come in and take a look, actually two, yes. I visited with the second one again today, circled back with him, asking him, you know, just can you give me a ballpark price on what you think? He was hesitant to provide that in our first meeting. I called back again today, and he said, look, I've got to take a really hard look at this. I'm not sure it's something I want to be involved in. It's too difficult to determine what our costs might be or how long it might take us. And so I've got to put more thought into this to even want to know if I want to give you a number. Not sure I want to be involved, so it's tough.
That was the same problem I had from the gentleman that I took down to look at it. He's like, this even on a time and material basis was something that failing is not a good option on this, so it's scary to people.
To answer your question in a little more detail, our biggest difficulty with it is the location of the sub-basement. Concrete that is crumbling away has to be demoed and removed from the sub-basement. The only way to access that is through a stairwell into that basement. There's no other access. The same for new concrete coming in and new rebar coming in that would be constructed to encase those columns. That cement may have to be brought in 5-gallon buckets.
Say, is there a way to get a mixer down there, a small mixer?
The door entry is very small. It may be, it's something where they could disassemble a very small residential type mixer and set it up in there. It's something I've thought about.
Well, that would seem like the easiest if that's the scenario, because there's no way.
But you still have to get the cement and the sand and all that.
It's easier to take it in bags rather than, trying to wheelbarrow or basically.
It's just a difficult logistic place that somebody to get to.
Well, I think we can look for this in a budget amendment, a ballpark figure. I'll be working with Kenny on that. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. I'll now move to approve Raker Roads Engineering proposal dated August 22nd in the amount of $3,600.
Second.
Second by Taylor. Discussion.
So out of curiosity, is there not, it says that mileage and gas is, how far away is this firm?
Eric?
Was there not a local firm, structural engineering?
I guess we didn't incur a local firm or visit with a local firm. We were trying to get someone in the area rather quickly who could come by and stop in and
Next guy.
and visit with us.
He knew who I was pointing to. He just was trying to avoid. I was trying to look that way. All right, so we started with a local firm. We started with CMBA, who came down with us to the thing and gave us some initial things. CMBA's kind of made I'll let you take over from here.
Yeah, Terry Glade with CMBA Architects. We did have structural engineering on staff, and we were looking at it. Since then, we have discontinued offering structural engineering. And we recommended actually Raker Roads as someone who's got the actual skill to deal with this sort of thing. This is not your normal type of beam and column type of structural design problem. This is a pretty specific kind of deterioration, and it's going to take. I felt that it was going to take somebody that's got some knowledge in dealing with this sort of thing. So that's kind of why we recommended this firm.
And CMBA originally also gave us another option of, I think it was a firm in Chicago, and their trip charge alone was $3,600 to come to even see the place.
We have a direct flight.
Even with the direct flight.
So that was part of the thing, and the other thing that led us to Ricker Roads is when we did the original first courtroom that we did, 203 up above. Eric was also brought in on that because we've worked with him on other historical restorations in Des Moines and knew how well he was and how competent he was, so he helped with some of that opinion. So he already was kind of familiar with the courthouse and kind of how it laid out, so it wasn't his first time looking at the building because he'd already been up for a couple other visits in a past project we used him on.
And is also being involved in the needs assessment that we're doing for the courthouse. And so there is a potential of maybe sharing a trip once in a while, but.
With the uniqueness of this project and, of course, my preliminary talks on all of this, at that point, we weren't sure where we would land, and I think we're lucky to get someone in the same state. Just because of the possible scope, no one can give an estimate up front what it's going to look like, because this is about failing steam traps over who knows how many weeks or months, impacting the sub-basement. So.
And one last thing to add to, Eric's got a couple of his, so Jared Hoffman that actually worked on the project for us, stopped by on his way home to see his family who live in Sioux Center. So it's not always it's not always the same, because Jared could come stop when he's on his way home. So Eric's got a number of different people in his office that are from this area as well.
Well, we are very committed to not having our courthouse fall over. So with that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those say nay. Passes 5-0. We're on to item 9B for information. This is courthouse HVAC automation project and change in the project scope.
So we were in the design phase of the courthouse HVAC automation project. During that design phase, Resource Consulting Engineers identified a good portion of the courthouse that a automation upgrade would not improve the creature comforts or the space demands that we currently have due to the system's designs. With that in mind, they looked at several different options on solutions to the problem. We've got a couple of those solutions. I'd like Corey Metzger with Resource Consulting Engineers to come up and talk to you about. We're currently considering splitting this project up into two separate projects. One would be HVAC automation controls. The second project, which is part of the scope change, would be the addition of some mechanical systems and equipment upgrades. Corey, if you'd like to explain that.
Sure. I'm Corey Metzger with Resource Consulting Engineers. So as Kenny mentioned, our original intent with this project was to replace automation throughout the building, but not replace equipment. You've got a lot of equipment that has useful life left in it and can serve the spaces that it's currently serving well. What we found, though, is that specifically on floors 3 through 7, you've got what are called blower coils. They're small air handling units. Those serve typically, you either have 2 or 3 per floor. They serve typically the north wall. One will serve the north wall, one will serve the south wall. If you have 3, there's a third that serves the center or the core of the space. So what we found are a couple of things. One of the goals of the project is to not run your chiller throughout the course of the winter. We'd like to be able to shut it down when it's -10 outside. You can't currently do that because you don't have economizer capabilities on those units. So there is outdoor air to the units. Economizers, when we bring in outdoor air to essentially free cool, spaces need cooling. So your interior spaces need cooling even on the coldest day of the year. We can't do that right now with the equipment that's in place. We also are limited to having, during the cooling season, a single control point for the north wall of the building and the south wall of the building on each of those floors. So what that means is you've got one sensor that controls the cooling on that blower coil, and in some cases, you're going to have 5 offices that will all be controlled together. So if one person is comfortable at 72 degrees and somebody else is comfortable at 78, you're going to have problems. You don't have individual space control throughout the cooling season with the systems that are there. So in looking at those two concerns, we started talking about what we could do to try to address that on those floors, because we certainly aren't looking to spend your money on a controls upgrade that's not going to improve comfort throughout those areas. We don't want to walk through the space and tell people, hey, we're doing all this work, it's going to get better. It might improve things in the winter, but frankly, in the summer, I think you're going to receive the same number of complaints you do now. So we started looking, and there are some system options available to us that weren't available when the project was done in 1997. Ultimately, what we're looking at doing is trying to put in a single air handler on each floor that has true economizer capabilities. So right now you have 2 outdoor air intake louvers on each level. You have no exhaust or relief at any of those floors. So what we'd like to do is make one of those louvers an intake and one an exhaust. And by doing that, we can create a functional economizer system. We can also set up a single air handler that serves each floor with zone control for each space. So we went through a number of iterations of options for how to do that, and ran our loads. So our initial intent wasn't to run heating and cooling calculations for these areas. And sorry if I'm going on, but I want to give you a full understanding of how we came to this conclusion. As we ran loads for the space, we realized there's no way to fit an air handler that would serve these spaces with variable air volume or constant volume air that would meet the loads in the spaces. Because of the amount of glass you have on each floor and the fact that significant portions of it are southeast and west facing, you've got significant loads in these spaces. There are a number that frankly don't have near an adequate amount of air right now. I don't blame the previous designers for that. I don't think they could have gotten any more air into the spaces than they did. Very tight ceilings. It was a limitation of the building architecture. But we came up with a solution to look at creating a single air handler. We'll have a hybrid system that includes some variable air volume controlled spaces, specifically on the north side or interior zones. And then we'll use chilled beams on the exterior zones. Those chilled beams allow us to get significantly more sensible cooling, which is the dry bulb cooling, what's not pulling moisture out of the air, just temperature lowering cooling, if that makes sense, for those zones, and should significantly improve comfort in those areas. So that's the path we've gone down, and I'd be happy to answer questions or.
Yes.
Okay, so Kenny, you started off with talking about creature comforts and control, but the one that I think we're alluding to right now is energy efficiency, right? With being able to shut down a chiller, not air conditioned 365 days a year when it's minus 10 out. So will the application of these chilled beams allow for the chiller to be taken offline and do that or not?
Okay, so there are a few things that we're doing throughout the building to address that. In the basement, you've got an air handler on the other side of this wall that doesn't have economizer right now. We're going to be adding an exhaust fan for that unit that will help to allow us to economize on the basement level. So there are a few spots in the building where you right now that are driving that need for chilled water throughout the year. One is the basement. The others are floors 3 through 7.
But doing this in 3 through 7 with the chilled beams would be.
It will.
Move it downfield anyway. Is that an accurate?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So what I've told Kenny and what I'll tell you is that there may be times where it's 30 degrees outside and you're running your chiller. Specifically, if you have a heavy load. I was in here one day when you're doing jury selection for a murder trial. If you've got hundreds of people in this space, we probably won't be able to get enough outdoor air to cool the basement effectively. So there may be days like that where you need to run the chiller, but normal, everyday operation will be shutting the chiller down the majority of the winter.
And thereby you'll be saving money, but it's really hard to quantify how much money you'll be saving because you don't know how many days you won't have load. Is that pretty accurate?
That's accurate, and the loading on the chiller is also something that changes significantly as we go into the winter months. But there will be significant savings there. The economizer that we'll be doing and the turn down that we can do up on those levels. Right now you've got constant volume systems. And this is ignoring the fact that right now you also have digital controls on cooling and pneumatic controls on heating that are likely fighting each other even in the winter. So significant energy saving potential certainly is what we're looking at.
Thank you.
So reasonable update, simply the way the building's designed.
It is. Corey, if you just stay one moment. Sure. I know this is all new information to you. It makes sense to us to stop in the project process where we were at. Again, as Corey said, we don't want to don't want to spend money that's going to be a waste. If we're going to do a project, we want to do it right or not do it at all. So as part of your, also, and that's why I asked Corey to stay up, your next agenda item is 9C.
Go ahead and move on to that.
I'd like Corey to explain, Corey, 9C is your fee for the additional project scope and the splitting of the project and morphing from one project to two separate projects.
So as we got into this understanding or realization that there were some fairly significant equipment changes necessary on floors 3 through 7, there were a few things that led to. One was that we needed some architectural services to support the project. We're going to be removing ceilings on those floors to remove existing ductwork and put new ductwork in. So we brought in an architectural sub-consultant to help us with that work. As we split the project into two separate projects, we need to put together two project manuals and two sets of drawings. So there's some, I don't want to say duplication of work, but some additional work that goes into putting together two separate bid packages there. And then there's a fairly significant amount of work that's gone into load calculations, equipment selection, and design of equipment replacement that wasn't anticipated as part of the project. Now, that being said, there's also some savings because our original intent was to do just controls, but for the courthouse and for the law enforcement center. So what you see here would have been more significant, but there's some savings in not doing the controls work at the law enforcement center as a full replacement there. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Overall, of all of the projects in our capital improvement plan, current or future, this is one of the best cases where we have a payback and there's efficiencies.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, most definitely. This is one of our best options to recoup some of our money.
And I would assume a rebate potential with Mid-American, with a custom rebate at some point?
Definite rebate potential, especially with the change of this project scope, adding equipment, and the chilled beam technology.
Yeah, and we're doing some other things on the basic controls project. We're going to be converting your chilled water system from constant flow to variable primary flow, and we've got some other changes there that should help us with that rebate process. But yeah, I think there's some good opportunity there.
What was the cost estimate, construction cost estimate beforehand?
We had budgeted $826,000 altogether for the HVAC.
Was that with the engineering or just the project?
That was just an overall CIP project budget, which basically encompasses everything that would go into that project.
So the estimate the new estimate that is on page 2 from RCE, the 1.1 million, is that the total scope project now?
That is
Or
just
just
our
construction?
best
Construction,
estimate.
that's our best guess of construction cost at this point.
So really, what we're looking at engineering-wise on this?
Your total engineering cost, I think, is the question.
Yeah, so our original fee was $64,000, and we've asked for an additional $12,000 for a total of $76,000.
And then is there project management costs included in that estimate, the 1.1?
The project management costs would be based off of the actual project or projects
Bid.
total.
Okay.
Bid total, yes.
What are we looking at, like 14%? 15?
Yes.
I'd move to approve the resource consultant engineer's proposal dated August 16th, 2017, in the amount of $12,000.
Second the motion by Taylor, and just add that the overage will come from other CIP items as budgeted, simply because this has a better payback. So previously budgeted figures, simply reallocating that to prioritize payback. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item 9D is for action, approval of CMBA proposal dated August 23rd in the amount of $2,500 for courthouse number 201, window and structural repair project.
The item before you is to approve a motion for fees for CMBA Architect for courtroom 201 in the amount of $2,500. This was the last courtroom structural and window repair project that we will be doing. The additional fee is due to the additional courtroom. It wasn't originally in CMBA's a fee for the courtroom project. Terry, if you'd like to make a short comment.
Yep, I'll just make a quick comment. As we've done the courtroom windows, when we last did the contract we have right now was for courtroom 207. We had a fee for construction administration for that set of windows. We subsequently added courtroom 209, and actually our first set of fees covered our costs for that set of windows, so we didn't have to ask for any extra there. Courtroom 201, we're getting to be the construction team is pretty old hat with this now, so I really don't think there's going to be a lot for us to do, but we do need to cover a few expenses there, and this is actually an hourly not to exceed. $2,500 would be the maximum of our fees, so it could potentially be less than that.
I'd move approval.
Second.
Second by Raddick. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item E is for action approval of the Siouxland District Health Boiler Replacement Project, AIA. Contract dated February 15th. Change order number 2 in the amount of $464.
The motion before you is not one that you would normally see. We're actually coming back with a credit, and this is approval for a change order to the AIA document, and so the credit would be $464.
Move it.
Second.
Thank you.
Motion by Taylor, second by myself. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Nobody? All right, well, it passes 5-0. Thank you.
I dislike change orders, I like that.
Right. As much as we dislike change orders, we like the positive ones. Item 10 for action is from the County Sheriff's Office, Major Todd Wick. Approval of a lease and services agreement between Satellite Tracking of People, LLC, by Securus Technologies and Woodbury County Sheriff's Office.
Good afternoon, Todd Wick,
afternoon.
Sheriff's Office. I've got what's in front of you here is just somewhat of a formality. A couple months ago it came to my attention that the company that we had our lease services agreement with for our electronic monitoring equipment had been bought by another company. And that was Corosoft at the time. The company, Satellite Tracking of People, through Securus Technology, said they would honor that contract. I requested that they write a new contract on their paperwork for us so that everything was up to date. And they provided me with a copy of that. I sent it over to Abby, and she looked it over. She made a few minor changes to some of the language in the contract. And I sent the contract back to Stop, and they obliged with all the recommended changes Abby wanted in the contract. They sent it back, and I'm here for approval just to sign the contract. And I'd just like to make it clear that this is free. This isn't going to cost you anything.
Move it.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. Sign the new contract. Discussion?
Major Wick, any concerns with it at all, the new company?
No,
anything?
None whatsoever. In fact, I think Abby can vouch. We were somewhat surprised that the changes she wanted in the new contract, they never balked at them. They just said, sure, made the changes, sent it back. Pricing's good. We review these every year, compare them to other companies, so we're happy with it.
Very good. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Thank you. And thank you, Abby. Item 11 from the Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Jeremy Taylor, is for action. This is approval of resolution for petitioning of IDNR, the legislature, and the governor's office to act to implement reasonable rules and regulations. Before we get started, Karen, could you please put the text of the resolution on the screen? And I would just ask Supervisor Taylor, you probably know this already, but just a word of advice to clearly delineate who this affects and also what it means if this resolution is signed as far as our current practice as a county. So I'll turn it over to you, and then the board can supply their comments or accept citizen input.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. If I can give a little bit of background before the resolution, I'd appreciate it. As you know, our board was petitioned by many in our county, and I had the privilege of visiting a couple of different neighbors and sites and hearing from folks. We were presented with a petition that talked about CAFOs and or SAFOs being built in rural Woodbury County, and some of them being built under the minimum threshold of 500 animal units to circumvent DNR guidelines and regulations. I'm reading from the petition language. These more than 60 residents do not support the construction and operation of these facilities and were unwilling to bear the cost, including the reduction to property values, air and water quality, and felt that they provide no direct benefit to the community or quality of life. We know that there are operations currently that are known to date to be located at 210th and Knox, 240th and Jasper, 110th and Delaware, and 210th and Osceola. And there's been much talk about future facilities to be built in eastern Woodbury County and Ida as well. We know most likely in order to support Seaboard Triumph. I've learned a lot about the industry on either side, but a lot of the concerns are the lack of a manure management plan and filings, the perception of a high mortality rate and the plans for disposal, the parent entity of such SAFOs, and if instead of building, for example, a 2,000 hog confinement, whether these are being parsed at 500 units and under in order to circumvent those otherwise regulations. We have a process normally by which rural landowners can have a say with public input and addressing a lot of the neighborly and environmental concerns that arise with these. But of course, our zoning authority is limited. So to Supervisor Ung, to our chairman's original question, this resolution would not give any more legal standing than the county currently has. I think that's clear. But what this resolution does do, in my estimation, is ask for the legislature, and we have a senator with us tonight, and I know we had a representative with us last meeting, but it asks the legislature, it asks the governor's office, and it asks the IDNR to address this issue in a way that balances a very important industry, admittedly, the number one a hog raising state in the nation, $17 billion industry, with the quality of life and environmental considerations that are very important, I think, which are reasonable and are wanting for some transparency. So those are kind of some of the opening comments. I do also and have planned to work with the business community that addressed some of these concerns lately as far as being good corporate citizens with Seaboard Triumph and others in order to be able to make sure that everything is being done above board. So with that, the resolution states this. It says, whereas the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors has been presented or made aware of several hog animal feeding operations just under the 500 animal unit threshold, requiring further DNR guidelines and regulations, and whereas more than 60 signatures and dozens of citizens petitioned the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors with concerns about lack of manure management plans and filings, appropriate setbacks, air and water quality, nuisance conditions, transparency, and a lack of neighborhood input. And whereas many citizens believe that several simultaneously constructed facilities just under the 500 threshold capacity by a parent entity, such as a corporate absentee owner or factory farm, circumvents the intent of the legislature to support small-time or family homestead farming. And whereas Iowa leads the nation as a pork producer, but reasonable rules and regulations can be achieved in a balanced way that does not overregulate and impede economic development of an important industry. And whereas citizens are looking for collaborative, cooperative solutions and seek SAFO and CAFO facility developers to sponsor a neighborhood gathering or meeting followed by a formal public hearing, which would place developers and neighbors face to face, where issues could be aired resulting in changes in location, construction, and operating practices, which could mitigate actual or perceived concerns. And whereas passage of legislation providing additional DNR review could lead to increased setback requirements, manure management filings, and manure management controls applying to all facilities, no matter the size of animal units. Now therefore be it resolved, the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors do hereby petition the Governor of Iowa, the state legislature, and IDNR to address these issues in order to balance the economic development key to our growth as an ag state with the protection of air, water, health, quality of life, and economic interests of the citizens that we were elected to represent. So that's the text of the resolution, and that is who's being petitioned by it. So that's an overview of both the concerns, the genesis of this, and with that, I'll take any questions or hand it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Board members, do you have any comments?
I do. Paragraph 2, where it says nuisance conditions, in my mind, that's why farms are rural. You don't put them in town. They have zoning ordinances in cities, in the county, the whole thing. I just don't get, and I live in the rural. I'm the only one on the board that does. And I'll say it again, while I do not want one next to me, I am not going to tell Mr. and Mrs. Agriculture that they cannot do with their property what they are legally entitled to do. The fourth one is Iowa leads the nation as a pork producer. Still sounds like I support ag except. Okay, that's I support ag except in my backyard. The next one is formal public hearing which would place developers and neighbors face to face where issues could be aired. First of all, I don't know that any of these Mr. and Mrs. Agriculture are doing anything illegal. Perhaps the corporate entities are skirting the law, so to speak, but that's not for me to decide. I'm really struggling in support of this resolution. I just am. And as much as I know how hog manure smells, I'm well acquainted with it, the bottom line is I have a hell of a time trying to tell Mr. and Mrs. Ag what they can legally do with their property. I'm done.
Personally, I would not support the letter with the 6th paragraph, or the 6th whereas in here. There's got to be some kind of limit somewhere. And I would like the state to set that limit, not us.
Are you referring to passes of legislation providing that paragraph?
Yes.
Wouldn't that imply that that's exactly what the state would be doing rather than us? It doesn't
But
ask
they've
that the
already
county.
done that.
Right, but not for the threshold under 500 animal units by which we're addressing in this particular resolution, which is to go to Supervisor DeWitt's, admission, I think, that that's what's being circumvented here. Personally, I think it's troubling. And I'm not saying anybody's doing anything illegal, and that's why I answered Supervisor Ung early on. There is nothing legally we can do. However, when we have 50 plus constituents come and say, but we want the opportunity to be able to, if you had a borrow pit going in, there's surely ordinances, and it does have to go through hearings. But in this instance, you're right, there's an exemption. It's the ag exemption. If I see a corporate entity take 2,000 or 5,000 and parse them off and do the division, and just go in 480 is planned all over, and maybe it's for 15, maybe 20, maybe for 25, and we admit, well, if it was next to us, it would be difficult. Nuisance conditions could be the disposal of hogs, and you don't know how that will be or how that will affect you or how close that is. I'm all for personal property rights, absolutely, but I also think when you adversely potentially impact somebody else, I mean, my goodness, if you have that, you pick for the apple orchard, the example that we were given, you have neighborly input. And I just don't see why we wouldn't want to have some sort of reasonableness in that. And so I appreciate the comments, but I also believe that, that's what we're asking for here, is that there's a balance that's struck. And so that would be my response.
Mr. Raddick, did you have anything else?
Well, in the text there, it does say, let's get back to it here. All facilities, no matter the size of animal units.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then, now you're getting into any kind of facility with animals, which could be backyard chickens, it could be, and then, what if they set the number at 400 animal units? Then, well, what does that incentivize you to build? 398 units,
But you understand legislation can be crafted in a variety of ways, and it can be crafted in order to say that if one corporate or parent entity who is an absentee farmer happens to live more than 500 miles away, that person will be looked at individually, right? So it's not, we have an idea that there's only one way, but, we have senators and representatives who make enough sausage, pardon the pun, that they can craft that in such a way that really gets at the intent of the circumvention of what would otherwise be a corporation that we admit, I think we all admit, is circumventing that. So,
well, what's to prevent the private sector from circumventing it again? It typically, when government tries to set some kind of new rule or regulation, the private sector just adapts around it and changes it. The other thing is on people that have violated the law. Well, there was one in Plymouth County recently, a cattle operation that did kind of skirt the manure management side of things and just kind of have it run off down the ditch. Well, they haven't had animals there for about 1.5 years now, from what I understand. So there's pretty severe penalties if you don't follow your DNR guidelines or manure management plan.
And what are they for an operation that has 475 units?
I imagine it happened the same way as it did for the individual that only had under the threshold with cattle.
So it takes a fish kill or something of an environmental.
Well, that didn't even have a fish kill, it just had manure in the ditch.
Right, but something that could lead to that to be retroactively punitive.
Complaining to the DNR came out there, and that guy's got no animals now, so for 1.5 years. May never,
Yeah, I think there can be retroactive or reactive, I should say, rather, responses, and I just think we could do something, or the state could do something short of that would be more proactive. But
It's challenging to say what, if the board would even take a stance on a particular regulation when the language is could or should do something. Certainly we could interpret it as affecting an area with one animal unit, but it's highly unlikely the state would move in that direction. The challenges we're dealing with, I think it's targeted at a very particular segment of those up to 500 units. Certainly we've received a lot of feedback from people that are above that, and rightly so, go through the regulations as onerous as they may be in each case. As I said before, I don't think it's a success if we simply support more regulation. It has to make sense. But again, this it really depends. We're punting to the state as far as I can tell in metrics. In saying there's a problem and we've received feedback, I see that as the major point to speak of today. But I do want to give a chance for if the state senator would care to address the board or respond to the pun. We're certainly willing to hear from you. Certainly.
Here's the resolutions from the other counties. A copy for each.
Okay, thanks. Well, good afternoon. I'm David Johnson from Ocheyedan in Osceola County. Thank you for this opportunity to come here today. I voted to increase the gas tax, but I didn't realize all that money was going to be spent here. Okay, but I'd vote for it again. We should have done it a quarter. Okay, just to give you a little bit of background, I have crisscrossed this state, driven thousands of miles on this issue. Why would I do that on my own time? It's because I am the last member of the 12 member bipartisan committee that was set up in 2002 to write the current laws. I'm the last one left in the legislature. And I feel I have a responsibility to follow through, since this has statewide implications as well as implications for my area. I am a retired dairy herdsman. I am a member of the Iowa Cattlemen's Association, the Iowa Holstein Association, the Iowa State Dairy Association, and the Western Iowa Dairy Alliance. And I feel that I'm well suited to bring some issues forward because I'm the only registered independent in the General Assembly. It's not this way or that way. It doesn't have to be that way anymore. There is common ground that can be found on this issue. Now, I was hoping to have some prepared remarks, but I was in Clay County today on this same issue. And I can address a few things here. I was in Clay County, and the nation's 8th largest pork producer, Iowa Select Farms out of Iowa Falls, had a request in for a CAFO in north of Rossi in Clay County. Are you familiar with this map, of this latest map from the DNR? I could leave it here with you, of today's swine operations. I want to emphasize swine, not chicken, not cattle, not turkey, but swine, okay? And I come from the northwest corner of the state. I represent 5 counties: Lyon, Osceola, Dickinson, Clay, and Palo Alto. This is a map of the impaired waterways in the state of Iowa. Half of our waterways are listed on the impaired list. Half of them. So today in Clay County, Iowa Select Farms made a big mistake, in my opinion. They didn't bother to talk to the neighbors. Now, if you look at the map, they had a master matrix score of 460, and you might hear more about this. I mean, they were able to get over the passing score of 440 by just 20 points. There's 880 possible, so if you get 50%, you pass. Okay, and the producer scores it, actually. Somebody hired by the big producers score, have a whole division to score those things. But they forgot to ask the neighbors. And here's one of the issues. And I just want to point out here that one of the items on the master matrix is to get points if you get your neighbors within a 1 mile radius to sign off. Okay, you get points for that. It's a good neighborly deal, but they decided not to do that. Had they done that, and I'm just finding this out today, they would have found out that this residence here and this residence here, both within a mile, are locations of multi-million-dollar specialty biosecure businesses. Okay? And they're within, and they didn't ask for that. To answer some of your questions about why this is needed, why we need to redo the matrix. I'm going to get to that. Okay, so I was there, and they ended up voting 2-3 not to send the matrix to the DNR. The DNR will approve it eventually, and it'll probably go on appeal to the EPC because of the dollars at risk here from existing private enterprise. existing private enterprise. So who's there first? That's always a good question to ask, who's there first? Okay, so I'm going to start by where, so I've been traveling, and so I started over in Alameda County. You're going to see a copy of a resolution that Alameda no, let me back up. I'm going to start down in Washington County, Iowa. Washington County is the home to 20,000 people and 1 million pigs and hogs. And if you look at that map that's going around, you know where Washington County is, south of Iowa City. They have to find new places to go. My travels have shown me that the pressure is on those counties where they ain't. Okay, they got to put these up somewhere, but let's be reasonable about it. They're going where some of those empty spots are. I saw a under 500 animal unit confinement 174 feet away from a farmhouse. The bedroom window of that farmer's house is 174 feet away. And it's legal, and it was put there by the 27th largest pork producer in the United States. Legal? Absolutely, because it's under 500 animal units. Right? I don't think so. That man was in tears when I visited that farm. I had been called. I get calls from all over the state to just come visit, and I like to see it for myself. And he was just about in tears and said he and his wife just had their retirement ruined because that confinement's going nowhere. Plus, the legislature, in their wisdom, this last session, I'm being a little sarcastic there, decided to take their right to file a nuisance lawsuit away, effectively. They put it all on the side of the livestock producer, not on the person who's there first, the farmer. It's not always a residence out there. It's not always a truck farm or whatever you have. It's not always that way. Okay, so that's down in southeast Iowa. Up in northeast Iowa, in Alameda
Senator,
County.
I hate to interrupt.
Yeah.
I'm a little worried you might break into a seminar.
No, okay, but let me just...
it's helpful, but if we could cut to the chase, we have other people that would probably like to speak as well.
All right. These things are happening. That's what I'm trying to tell you. They're being built in karst areas where there are sinkholes. Down in Fremont County, I was just down there, and all these green parcels have been bought up by a Lawrence, Kansas gentleman who's now threatening their water supply, which is free of nitrates. Oh, by the way, I do have a thing here for you. Okay, so there are 14 counties right now that have adopted similar resolutions or letters to the governor and the legislature to bring up the matrix again, look at our livestock regulations, and recommend changes. I had a bill that did that, but it didn't even get an initial hearing because the agriculture industry doesn't want any change. I'm sorry to see that too, because we can all do this together. Okay, these are resolutions. 14 counties now, you could be the 15th. They just asked us down in Des Moines to take some feedback and from what they're saying and make some changes. Oh, also, you can share this with, there are new studies coming out about nitrates and their long-term effects at low levels to people's health, and mostly women, especially women with cancer. Okay, so let me just sum up this way, and I'm going to stick around and listen to the discussion. You've probably heard about the nutrient reduction strategy, have you? That's our big plan to reduce phosphorus and nitrates in our waters that leave the state and go down the Gulf of Mexico by 45%. Legislature has never funded it, okay? There are no random acts of conservation. We can't just go about this, just piecemeal a little bit at a time. Urban and rural have got to work together on this. There's got to be transparency. There's not transparency on the use of many LLCs and LLPs that are being done among families. I know a situation, you're going to find this out here in Woodbury County, that a parcel of land is going to be divided up against investors or family members, and you're going to get multiple sites of under 500 animal units. So you're going to put an even bigger load on the neighborhood. And You know, Bob Ray, I've read some of his. Finally, I'll just make this point. I've been reading some of his, Governor Ray's condition of the state speeches from the early 70s. And in every one of them, he brings up land conservation. Every one of them, he says that farmland is held privately, but it's held in the public trust. Okay? We can do both. We can do both. So I encourage you to look at this resolution. If the whereases need some work, fine. But all you're doing, you're not putting yourself in any position, except we've got an issue here, and it doesn't mean that we have to do anything in Des Moines, but we need to at least take this issue up, because it's happening all over the state, and it will happen here in Woodbury County. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator, for your input.
Can I say something about this?
We have a comment from Supervisor already.
That'll be just a moment, since everybody else already commented.
Yes.
First of all, I want to tell you, I think this was a pretty good job, Jeremy.
Thank you.
I don't often get to tell you how much I agree with you. All we said we really wanted to do was be a voice for some citizens. And we're not asking to overregulate anything, I don't believe. I don't think we should, and I don't think we have the ability to do that. But I think we do have a voice that could be heard in Des Moines through the DNR, through the state legislature. And I would like to see the whole process be a lot more transparent than it is now. And that's why I'm going to support this, because I think it does. I was worried about how the level would be, because I loved it when you said we can do this together. You know, this is one of the things that should be issued as an Iowa thing. And I think that's why I will support it.
Is the board ready to hear citizen input? We want to hear from you, both sides. If your view's already been stated, you might not have to come up and state it again, but if you'd like to, you have that right.
For those of you that don't know, I'm Larry Crawford. I live 1 mile away from this Jasper and 240th, all right? 1 mile as the crow flies. I'm not against hog production. I am not against confinements going up, but I am a big advocate on stewardship, all right? And God put us on this earth for just a short period of time to be stewards. That's it. So I look at this nursery that's going in on 240th and Jasper, and I look at it and I'm like, it's on HEL ground. Do you all know what HEL ground is?
Highly erodible.
Highly erodible land. All right? It's in a dish bowl. So they're going to build this nursery in this dish bowl, and we just experienced 5+ inches of rain over the last 7 days in our neck of the woods. All right? And they're pumping water off of this site because of the water that came down off of this 80 or 120 acres. All right? So a 5-inch rain, 6-inch rain, 7-inch rain down the road is not unhistoric for this area. Could have been put in a different place, could have been put in a place where there could have been stewardship management practices been practiced better. Heck yes. You know, you put manure on this dish bowl. We get a 5-inch rain like we did last week. The creek is less than a 1/4 mile away. Fred's Pond is less than a 1/4 mile away. You call DNR and you ask them to take a look at this, we can't do a blasted thing until we see fish die. You call NCRS, they can't do a doggone thing until something happens. This resolution is one of those things. Like I said, I'm not against hog production. I'm in the seed business, for Christ's sake. All right, I deal with farmers on a daily basis, 6 days a week. And so it's just the aspect, there's just good planning that goes into these things. All right? That's my 2 cents.
Someone else?
Hi.
Hi.
Penny Price Fee. I'm a lifelong resident of Iowa and of Sioux City. If men will exclude any of God's creatures from compassion and pity, you will have men who will deal likewise with people. So wrote St. Francis of Assisi in the 1200s. So much for the argument that man has dominion over animals. The more helpless a creature, the more entitled it is to protection by man from the cruelty of man. James Herriot, a veterinarian and the author of All Creatures Great and Small, who've entertained many of us many times, and I paraphrase his words, people need to realize how helpless animals are, how like children they are dependent on adult caregivers to take care of their needs. Animals are our obligation, our responsibility, which we have no right to neglect, certainly not to violate by cruelty. The argument that corporate ag provides cheap meat is totally false. Because of the tax breaks these corporations are given, and certainly the cleanup costs that never seem to be paid by those that make the mess. Those come from us, the taxpayers. These CAFOs are totally without transparency. All is done behind closed doors, and if one speaks out against it, we're threatened by Iowa's ag gag law. CAFOs are a blight on the beautiful land that is Iowa. We can and we must challenge the proliferation of these ugly animal concentration camps. Iowans and animals deserve better. We need to restore the local option, which was taken away from us several years ago, and we need to keep Iowa from becoming a hog bog.
Thank you. You combine St. Francis of Assisi with hog bog. I appreciate the, go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Rudy Daniels. I live at 3422 Davis Avenue here in Sioux City, and I've sent you an email earlier. You may have read it or not. This is a very serious matter. I mean, it's not just argument of land, animals, and so forth. This is a serious matter for Iowa and really the nation at large. Even though some counties have approved the measure or a similar measure, other counties have not approved it. What I would like to ask is that before voting on this measure, that you look at the data, look at it independently, not just what is presented to you this evening, but try to do some research on your own, because some of the groups that have been presenting this have been presenting inaccurate and downright false data. And it's backed by groups that have been socially disruptive on numerous occasions. Should a proposal like this go through into the legislature, it will definitely affect Iowa agriculture, and that's commented upon already, but it will affect it in a very harmful way. As you know, that the United States, particularly with pork products, is engaged with deals in economy with China, and the United States wants to expand that. So what I'm saying is that I do not want to see any harm come, obviously, to our own community, but also the nation. So I do ask you to independently look at the data, look at the information, rather than just something that's provided in front of you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Eric Nelson from Mobile. I've been here the last 3 weeks kind of watching all this take place, and I came up and spoke a week ago and urged caution at any unintended consequences that a resolution like this might bring. You know, citing livestock buildings is tough, and it's why that the state legislature has taken it over, because there's local politics involved. And folks here, don't think for a minute that this body isn't rife with local politics. I'm not sure Mr. Johnson, what, I guess he was a guest that was invited, but he's not from the county. I don't believe he owns property here. He's lobbying on behalf of resolutions like this all over the state, and I found it very bothering when there were a bunch of Woodbury County residents here that only have this body to fall back on, and I would ask this body to rely on Woodbury County residents for their information. There are outside groups that have moved in, ICCI to be one of them, that is entering in heavily and has helped spread some of the less than factual information that the prior speaker just spoke of. And so I would urge caution on that. But again, on citing livestock buildings, county line disputes is another reason that the state has taken them over. You know, if every county, if we have a hopscotch of regulations, it would be disastrous when you have folks across the road from each other that have to abide by different rules. And obviously there's a lot of emotion involved in this, and that's what happens when you have the state run things. It removes some emotion, because one of the most bothersome things of coming to these meetings the last 3 weeks is there's been really an undertone that folks that are building these buildings, you know, the word circumvention has kind of some negative connotations, and these people have done nothing wrong according to code. In fact, most of these buildings, one of them is over a mile from the primary complainer. The most close is 1,250 feet. In every case, buildings 2 or 3 or 4 times larger could have been built and still complied with code. But yet, listening to the tone that's carried on in these chambers concerning this, it hasn't been, I feel dirty, like we're livestock producers have done, you know, that we're doing something terrible. Specifically, the one that's of really concern to me is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Paragraph 6, where it says you're asking for these controls on all facilities, no matter the size. And you realize that DNR does not regulate only swine operations. They regulate anything that eats and defecates. And so there's a bunch of cattlemen here that are really concerned, because our ability to run operations, to expand operations, large or small, is likely to be impacted on what you ask for. And I would just simply say that it's going to be written that Woodbury County has declared war on livestock production if this resolution is passed. And you can determine whether you want that moniker put on Woodbury County or not.
I'm not a farmer. My name is Renee Weinberg. I live in Sioux City, Iowa, but all my relatives are farmers. So I come from a farming background, but they're all small farmers up in Minnesota. So that's not in Iowa. My concern is water quality, care of animals, common sense. I don't think anything in this resolution, like you said, is really going to make a law. I don't think it's going to change anything, but it is going to speak to the fact that these things need to be placed in common sense areas that are environmental, take care of the animals, take care of the people. People eat meat, that's a fact, but we don't need to become a hog manure state. So we need to have the right regulations. I don't think this is changing the regulations, but this is speaking to people whose concerns are that these not be placed right next to their home or in places where it's going to go into rivers. We do have a water quality issue in this state already, and so if we're going to increase a lot of, under whatever your numbers were, of hog facilities in a huge area, this is going to become an issue. And so you either address it now or you'll address it in the future. Thank you. I appreciate your listening.
Thank you.
Jeff Pope, Anton, Iowa. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to all supervisors for hearing this. Also, I guess I'd like to also reiterate that I don't hold it against anybody, you know, as far as what they do to make money, you know, and it's one of those things, how you do it, unless it infringes upon others. And one of those things about all this confinement stuff is that without regulations, and I'm not saying we want to regulate everything, because I don't like Big Brother watching over me all the time, you know. But I do applaud Supervisor Taylor for at least taking the initiative to look at this and to see what's going on. And also, my family on both sides come from a family farming background. And so with that, I think of what they would say if they were through this process. And, again, I'm not trying to say that one side's wrong or another side's wrong or right, but, I think of regulations, or I think of things, and Woodbury County is a little different. But with my uncle, when he was living up in Lyon County, they had the same issue. And one of the issues up there, if you've been up there, is the fact that everything is 1 mile sections. Nothing was regulated. But finally, they passed the regulations, and they said that, and I don't know if it came from the DNR, it came from the state, or from the county board of supervisors, but it was that every hog confinement had to be 1 mile apart on each section. Sounds good on paper. But if you actually draw your square and draw 4 squares and then draw the road in the middle, if somebody wanted to circumvent that, they could actually put a hog confinement on all 4 corners, 30 yards apart. And there was no regulation against it, because technically the hog confinements were 1 mile apart on the section. And my uncle used to say that. He says, my gosh, think about it, that would do the water control, the air control. If you had 2, 3 houses on every corner of a road intersection. So like I said, I don't know if the state does this or if the county had done that. But the other problem there is, I do know that when you talk to DNR officers about regulations, they would like to be able to control a little bit more. But Des Moines doesn't want to, because they just don't want to do it. And Supervisor DeWitt, I understand where you're coming from too. You don't want to regulate what somebody's doing on their own yard. And I understand that, I respect that. But when that circumvents on somebody else, then there's an issue. I have a neighbor, and I was kind of hoping that they would be here tonight, but he couldn't probably get off work. But the thing is, they just got done proving 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that a hog confinement that's over my house, over the hill from my house, actually contaminated their water. Their water's done, and nothing's going to be done about it. And they knew that when it was first built. It was grandfathered under. It's probably 20, 23 years ago when that came in. And they came back, and what happened was there was a plastic liner put down, because back then they didn't want to put cement or whatever. And it was a cost-effective thing, and it was the manure would erode the cement, and all. I mean, there was all kinds of reasons. And what happened was, whoever came and tested, whether it was DNR or an independent supervisor, they tested the groundwater underneath the liner by punching holes through it. Not too damn smart, but they punched holes. But because the owner didn't do it and the manager didn't do it, there was no cleanup required. And now, the water down, which is probably 3/8 of a mile away to the east, is contaminated. That well is contaminated. They worked on that for a couple of years, and my neighbors were able to prove that hog confinement contaminated that well. And so, but what's going to be done about it? Nothing. In fact, what happened was, those owners of that hog confinement just bought that land here a year and a half ago, and was bragging about the fact that now that they own it, they don't have to clean it up. Just stays. I'm not saying that you have to try and pass anything. I'm just saying facts here, like this way. And I applaud that you're at least trying to think of our water control. I live in the timber, and for years it was always nice that you could hang out clothes, and you didn't have really that many flies. Since this hog confinement has gotten up there, my house is just, you got flies all the time. The screens are full of flies. It's like I got a farm right next to me. And like I said, I grew up working for farmers, and I loved it. And I don't hold anybody against it. I would do it again. But the thing is, I do think that there has to be some kind of control. And just think about other people is what I'm thinking. I guess that's pretty much what I have on that. But like I said, I'm not trying to offend anybody. But there is issues. And when they're cleaning out their lagoons, man, you gotta close all the windows in the house. And I'm 3/8 to a half a mile away, and I gotta close all my windows. Otherwise, it gets just atrocious in the house, and it'll stay that way for a couple, 3 days, 4 days. And then it's just like I'm a hog farmer myself, and I walked in with the hog clothes and laid them right in my living room. And, you know, that's just the way it is. And I just happen to be in the wrong direction. That's the way it goes. But I guess that's all I have to say about that. But like I said, yeah, I don't want to offend anybody, but that's my viewpoint on it. So.
All right. Thank you for your respectful remarks.
John Wilkie. I live at Danbury, Iowa. I happen to be a farmer and also a banker for over 30-some years. I think you need to be very careful with your resolution. If you go to local control, like some of you are promoting, you're going to have one county with one set of rules, another county with another set of rules. There's hundreds of millions of dollars of land that will be affected when you do an appraisal of that. Restrictions on the use affects the appraised value of that land. Plymouth County has different rules than Woodbury County. Potentially the land in Woodbury County would be adversely affected. That ultimately will affect your tax base. Way more rural land than there are rural residences. Secondly, as a farmer, I used to have a feedlot. My dad had a feedlot before me. He asked Iowa State to lay out pollution control back in 1970. So for 50 years, we've been controlling runoff from our feed yard. Back about 15 years ago, they changed the rules. What Iowa State had laid out, they no longer liked. And so now they've come back and said, okay, there is no money for you because you've already been controlling pollution. If you'd have been dumping it in the creek, we'd help you fix it. But since you've already been doing it voluntarily, there's no money for you, but you are forced to fix it. And so we'd put in an artificial wetland. They made us tile a half mile or a quarter mile through the artificial wetland to control seasonal water flow from a tile line located below the manure management system. Because potentially there could be some manure, if the manure management system broke down, which had been there for 50 years, never had a problem. But if that broke and one piece of manure went into that water of the U.S., that would be a potential fine. So we had to tile through the wetland to put that in. NRCS said, this is crazy. You put it in, now we're trying to destroy it. So now we have to tear that out again at our own expense. I'm not a corporation. I live on my farm. I smell manure more than anybody else. What you're trying to do will affect me. If I have somebody move in, I had a neighbor left, passed away. He sold the acreage to somebody from town. Fortunately, they seem to be very ag-friendly. They could come back and say, my cattle stink. If I had 200 head, I'm not under the regulations, but I'm stinking. So they don't want it. It's a nuisance. That you just have to be, you can't protect it and say, well, this farmer's okay, but this farmer's a corporation, so we want to regulate them, but we can't regulate them. You're going to affect us all.
Thank you. I don't want to see a patchwork either. Supervisor Taylor, could you address your thoughts, and because you authored this or you know, I see some portions similar among other counties, but you took this upon yourself. Do you see a change in any approval process that would come before the county board without some sort of statewide change in any case?
Are you asking me if I'm advocating to have county control of siting versus the state legislature move or a change to law?
Basically a patchwork was.
No, I mean, I think that this is fairly open to advocate and to be a voice to say that there are issues when there's a threshold that's being, and when I say circumvented, I'm not talking about the people who are actually, I'm talking about those who are in control and are parsing. And I want to be clear about that. But I think that that's the concern, if there isn't a change to state law, to be able to have the IDNR address that otherwise. So, I mean, it's sort of a darned if you do, darned if you don't. I mean, if you don't like the openness of the resolution advocating on behalf of the constituents, what would be the prescriptive answer? I mean, so that's something, if there's no desire, and there may not be by a majority of the board, but if there's no desire to put forward a resolution or to be that voice stating that concern, then that's fine. But if there is, this isn't so prescriptive as to say this change needs to occur to the matrix. It's stating that these are some real concerns that we're seeing in Woodbury County, and this isn't the end of it, it's the beginning. I mean, I think we know that this is in the future, and it's an opportunity, I think, for this board to address it in a fairly general manner, to ask that some of these concerns are being brought forward by our constituents. I don't know if that answers your question, Supervisor Arnold.
Basically, until a state law would change something, you wouldn't foresee rejecting permits or zoning?
Right, I mean, I want to be clear that what I'm not advocating, and I think I've stated this, is that I don't think that there's legal standing right now for us to do otherwise. I mean, the 1996 case law, Kuhl versus Cass County, establishes that. We have to operate within the confines of the law, but I also want to be responsive to people who are asking for us to act that do live in our community.
Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, and the statement you just made that, this is just the beginning of potentially a long process, but yet there's been a rush, there's been a hurry. This has all happened really quickly, and in light of the fact that this is going to be a long, tumultuous deal, maybe even a motion to table to discuss further. I mean, in my eyes, there's been a rush job to get this through to the point of this resolution today.
If I can just clarify, when I say that this is just the beginning, well, I'm talking about the number of what I believe will be SAFOs that will be underneath that 500, that there's been talk of 20 to 25, either in eastern Woodbury County or Ida County. I don't know, that may just be countenance and rumor, but the idea is I don't think that the number of facilities that are going to be popping up are going to slow down. So that's what I was referencing by just being the beginning.
Sir?
Mark Baldwin, Anthem. Yeah, I think I urge caution on this. Once you start trying to put language in like this, like say you start on a slippery slope. I actually, my family, we own a CAFO, okay? We have a beef feedlot. And, so whatever threshold, Mr. Raddick made a very good point about if you go down, if you lower that threshold, what is that threshold down to? 1? I mean, the DNR, they have rules. I mean, if you dirty the waters of the United States, when you have 1 or 3 or whatever, you could be responsible for that. So that it goes back to being good stewards. Is we all try to be good stewards. We try to be good neighbors. Like I say, it's just a slippery slope if we would try to put that language in there. Just an example, if you lower that threshold, what would be required of the people of this county? Okay. As of right now, we have to keep, we have about 5 different sets of books. We have to keep daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly reports. And every 5 years, we have to go through our 5-year examination with the DNR. So as you lower this threshold, you're going to put that onto all the people of this county. So I mean, that's what's required of you. So I just would like you to think about that. If something eats and it produces manure, you could have a potential runoff. So whether that's an acreage, anything, so you're getting into that area when you're starting to talk about this. And like I say, it's not species specific. I mean, the DNR regulates all livestock, whether it's livestock or poultry. So you're going to include everybody into this picture when you do that. And like I say, there's a lot of acreages around the city here. Horses are livestock. You're really getting into that area if you go down this path. So, thank you.
Thank you. I'm noticing shared heartburn around the 6th paragraph. In your opinion, Supervisor Taylor, how important is that to the resolution, to be blunt?
asking for legislation that provides the DNR to review.
That specifically also states all facilities, no matter the size, but yes, that.
Yeah, so I would, if there's a suggestion for language change that would help for the rural constituents that have come before you to have passage of a resolution, I would take any suggested language changes to that. That would be, whether it be reviewing, which facilities. I think earlier on we had a discussion of whether you have an absentee corporation that is parsing. I'll take any suggested language that anyone wants to put forward instead of simply having the out of voting against it, right? So if there's language change, I'm certainly amenable, as long as we could still be a voice for those who have voiced their concerns.
Understood. Sir?
I'm Leo Yoakum. Jeremy, how many people worked on this resolution?
Primarily myself.
I don't know if it was Wednesday or whatever. I got a call from, I assumed he was helping you, asking about some of the information on turns on per units.
Who are you referencing?
John.
Okay.
Hello. And also on unit numbers. And it was very elementary questions that I thought, as a board, if you're drafting this, you should have known them. I'm echoing some of the ideas. I think you should hold off on this. I'm not saying, don't continue to look at it. Hold off on this resolution a little bit. Couple things I want to point out. The DNR does monitor. You never know when they're driving by. The rules and regulations are very strict when it comes to manure disposal. In 77 to 80, 85, manure was classified as a waste. Now it's worth a lot of money. We send in our samples to decide how much NP&K is in that. We go out and we apply it, and it has to be injected. We inject it in the soil usually 3,000 to 4,000 gallons per acre, which is there's 28,000 gallons in an inch. So we don't even have a quarter of an inch of manure on the ground. And it's injected into the root zone, which is about 4 inches into soil. So normally, that's all pretty well taken care of. If you're looking at the language of all animals, regulations say we cannot spread our manure on the ground when it's frozen. You have a lot of cattle guys here that turn their cows out in the stocks. You let that, if that regulation would come into play, those cows could not be out in the cornfield when it's frozen, because when they leave their dung behind and this snow melts, it's going right down into a waterway. They're in violation. Just plain and simple, they're in violation. So that's one thing. With regards to animal care that I heard, watching the, if we have deads, we have a pork quality assurance. Pork quality assurance that is mainly dictated a lot by Iowa Pork Producers Association, and now the packers have got involved in that, like Tyson's, Seaboard, Triumph, all of them. We have to meet criteria. They come out and they go through the ventilation that we have in our buildings to make sure that it's animal comfort. They come back, if we have a compost facility, they take a look at that. They make sure the weeds are mowed around the facility so we don't have rodents. Are we putting out rodent traps? All those things are in play. There's a lot that goes into pork production that is monitored by other people. And why was the PQA put in? Because the public demanded it. They wanted to know that the meat that they were eating was coming from producers that were very conscious of animal comfort. And that's what we do. We make money because they are comfortable and they do produce. So with that in mind, I'm asking you to table this thing right now, take a good look at it, and, down the road if you want to do something, but I am glad you're not going for county control. I think that's a big plus. Thanks.
Brian Weaver, longtime Woodbury County resident. First of all, I want to praise this new board here for taking care of the rural roads much better than they have been for a long time.
Thank you.
And I'm not a hog guy, but still, the people that are raising hogs, we're kind of middlemen out here. You can say, geez, it's corporate farming taking over. Well, it's our kids or us. If we want to raise hogs for these guys, it's no different than us raising cattle. Basically, we're just working for Tyson or JBS, not JBS anymore, but whoever. So you got to be a little careful on saying, oh, it's corporate, it's not family. Families are involved. And here, under this one statement, says, these facilities provide no direct benefits to our community or quality of life, yet we pay the cost. Well, you could easily say that about Seaboard Company coming in. It does provide benefits to our community, our quality of life, jobs, same way with these small hog farms. I'm familiar with this one on Jasper that there's some complaints about, only that I drive by it every day, checking some cows, and I can give my opinion and say, that's a damn poor spot. But they could look at something I do, say it's a damn poor spot. So, I just think you got to be very careful on making just because 60 people came to you, we could get 60 people, livestock producers, and rah you guys up. But, they're not experts on this. Maybe the people that have livestock are more of an expert. I'd say 99% of the people with livestock, they want good water. They want to take care of every darn hog in there. Look at these facilities. These hogs are spotless in those pens. They're trying to make money. They can't do it without taking good care of their livestock. And the manure stinks, but what the heck? But be careful. What little things you start leaning and say, well, let's regulate this little regulation, which is pretty soon where are you going to stop? Careful what you get involved in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maria Rehnquist. I sent you a letter the last Board of Supervisors meeting I couldn't attend. But I'm a resident of Woodbury County. I own property in the county and Sloan, Iowa, as well as Sioux City. This is the beginning to stop corporate greed. Yes, it stinks, and nobody has talked about water and quality of life. Yes, we have nutrients in our state and poor water quality. So I encourage all of you to start something. You dare to serve your constituents. And I encourage you to start from resolution. Thank you, Taylor, for doing the resolution. And remember, elections are around the corner. Thank you.
From the looks of it, it'd be 50-50. Never know.
I have some letters. Excuse me. Thank you again for hearing this issue. And thank you, Jeremy, too, for
presenting this petition. I have some letters from in support of the petition. One from Kim Alexander, who spoke at the last meeting, so I'd just like to submit those to you. One for each of you.
Are there 60 though?
No, there's not 60. Sorry, I don't have 60 letters. I guess I live near the Jasper facility, and one of my concerns, and when I went and talked to my neighbors about it, was that it was under the 500 animal units. So when a facility is under 500 animal units, there is no requirements regarding a manure management plan. They are not in the DNR database, so they're not regulated by DNR. It's private. There's no public information about it. You can't, and also there's no separation distances at all. So it doesn't have, there's no separation distances from a private residence or public use area. So I guess that was the concern that I had as a person that was in that community, was that they're basically putting in what I would consider an industrial facility. And I've talked to the guy who was going to put it in, and I asked to meet with both the farmer that was putting in the building and the landowner who's going to benefit from the manure. And neither one, I mean, they would talk to me on the phone, but they wouldn't agree to meet with the neighbors in our community. They're supposedly having some sort of open house when the confinements are done. So I really was hoping just that I think if there was a process for neighbors to be informed, which when I first heard a rumor that this could be coming to our community, I contacted the person that was going to put this in, and he assured me that there would be a process, that neighbors would be informed, that we would be involved in the process, and that didn't happen. And so I think one of the biggest concerns for us out there is just that we're involved in the process and we're made aware that something's going to come into our community that have concerns about. So the developers or whoever's putting these buildings up, whether it's a corporation or a farmer, can educate us, and also so that they realize that it does impact us. I know it's their land, they can do, and they have a choice, you can do what you want, but it does impact your neighbors. And just out of courtesy, I feel like neighbors need to be informed and involved in the process. And I think when we're looking at the resolution, maybe when you're looking at number 6 with the animal units, it wouldn't be cost effective to build a confinement for one animal unit. And we're concerned about buildings that hold thousands of animals that produce lots of waste that could affect groundwater. That is, and in a confined situation, not somebody putting cows on their stalks in the winter, not somebody owning a horse. And I just think that's inflammatory rhetoric. That's not what we're talking about. And perhaps, at some point it won't be it's not cost effective to build at so many animal units, it won't be cost effective to build these buildings for them. So maybe 300 animal units, I don't know, but really I think I think the purpose of the petition is just to encourage the DNR, to encourage the legislator, look at this issue again, there's some problems. Let's try to fix them. And it needs to be a cooperative effort and collaborative, it's not a us versus them. We need to work together on it, and that's all we're asking for, is to say, hey, we can't keep ignoring this issue. Can we as Woodbury County Supervisors feel like, let's not ignore it anymore, let's start to address it and collaborate and talk and figure out what will work for both the people that live out in the county and the people that want to put in facilities such as this. That's the purpose of, that was my main goal when I started to see what was happening and see how it could affect me and my neighbors. So I just would like for you to keep that in mind. I think if you want to table it and discuss it further, I think that's great. I think it would be great if it had input from the whole board, if that's what you guys agree to do. But I think we're kind of missing the purpose. I don't know that everybody's quite hearing what I think Jeremy's purpose to presenting this resolution is. So I just encourage you to reflect on that.
I personally don't see much advantage in postponing due to the fact that we've had quite a bit of public input, over the weeks. So I'd just say that.
Okay.
Hello, I'm not sure how late your Board of Supervisors meetings usually go, but I'm guessing this one's past your time limit, so I won't take very much time. I'm Breanne Streck. I live within a few miles of two of the sites, the 210th and Jasper, or 240th and Jasper and the 210th and Knox, and personally know the folks that are putting both of those barns up. We ourselves are hog producers. I don't live on the site of where we raise our hogs, but we have two 1,600 head hog finishers that my dad started 40 years ago. We are people that care for our land. I understand many of the concerns that people have, but what makes me concerned is that a lot of the language in there makes it sound like we are trying to circumvent the law. I know you keep referencing the corporate portion of it, trying to get under 500. They're making a business decision that is best for their businesses. They aren't trying to circumvent a law, be illegal. They're not trying to be a bad neighbor. What they're trying to do is make their business work. So for us, my husband and I chose to come back to the farm. We have 3 kids. I have a 9-month-old son that I pray to God can raise hogs on our farm, the farm that my mom and dad live on today. Things like this are going to start us down the road of not being able to do that. And I choose to live there because I appreciate the fact that we can raise the animals that we raise. We can feed the world. We use our manure in a way that we have a management plan, no matter if we have 0 animals or 5,000 animals. And we're going to put it on our land in the best way that we can in order to grow a crop. It gets me fired up when I think about the fact that people are talking about us who are our neighbors that think we're not trying to do the right thing. And I think that is inaccurate. One of the points on here that I'd like to point out as well is you reference factory farms. The people that are putting these up, in order to make it cash flow, so if you look at a new hog barn, it costs approximately $750,000 to build a new hog barn. Not many of us have that lying around, so they are going to someone to be able to help them fund their hog barn. Is that person going to have the day-to-day, the living with the manure and everything that goes along with that? No. But is it a way for someone that's a young farmer to get into agriculture in rural Iowa? Yes. That's what my husband and I are trying to do as well, and stay in rural Iowa. I have a job off the farm because we cannot make it work without a job off the farm today. Livestock is a way to do that, and I just fear that this will hamstring us there. And as we talk about size of animal units, my girls raise bucket calves. We have 2 bucket calves. By this rule, we would think about regulating things such as that. So I just caution you that lots of parts of this, I think, could use some additional wording changes and some more information. And I certainly appreciate you listening to what we have to say today. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Alan McGaffin. I'm from Sioux City, and I urge the Board of Supervisors to give their assent to this resolution. I think it's well worded. It has teeth in it. The DNR does need to revisit the master matrix. The master matrix is an extremely easy test, an extremely low hurdle for any farm to pass. And I think a word that has come up, and it's just come up the last 2 speakers, the circumvention issue. I would think most farms, most businesses would feel offended by the word circumvented, but that's precisely what they're doing. They should stand head and shoulders with pride that they're obeying and they're abiding by all of the rules and the regulations instead of slipping under the wire. These numbers are huge. Right now we have 21.6 million hogs in the state of Iowa. We are head and shoulders #1 in the nation as far as hog producers. It used to be, we used to vie with North Carolina. North Carolina decided to put some teeth in the law because of the very things that we're talking about today. We have 9,000 CAFOs, 9,000 factory farms in the state of Iowa. We have fewer Department of Natural Resources inspectors than we've ever had. We have 15 3/4 inspectors for farm operations when we used to have 24 to 26 inspectors for farm operations. We've reduced the numbers. While we've increased the number of farms, increased the number of hogs, we've reduced the number of inspectors. And it's the water that is the most impaired. Most of this discussion is involved fragrance and nuisance issues regarding bad air, which is very considerable. And it can lead to some health problems as we're learning. But the water is the main issue. Yes, farms wish to use the manure in an acceptable way, in a useful way, in a way to fertilize their fields. But, as the man said a little bit ago, applying manure to frozen fields is a sure way to pollute the water in a real quick way, and it's not going to be absorbed by the soil, as we know. Please give serious consideration to this and approve it. Thank you very much.
I'll entertain a few more.
Randy Riediger, Hinton, Iowa. We're all getting to be good friends.
Hi, Randy.
I'm one of the reasons that we probably got this all started, and I'm not opposed to your resolution there, Jeremy. I'm going to kind of pick on you. Last time I was here, they were picking on Rocky in his house, so
You can go back.
pass the buck.
That's fine.
But I don't see where you might have talked to any other cattlemen's organization, pork producers, council in the county. I'm not talking about statewide, because they don't know what our issues always are. But I think if you would talk to these local organizations, and there's a few more to, you can just go on down the line. Maybe we'd have something, and I'm not, you say 60 signatures, we're singling out some people here, and it sounds like these are all their views. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, I don't know. But we need to have a second viewpoint on this, and then I think maybe you can probably get to a consensus on it. So, thanks for your time.
Hello there.
Hello.
Walt Reinhold. It'd be reasonable to address the concerns of these citizens. And with that in mind, you could put a hold on all building of confinements, and you guys have the power. Now, we got to do something when somebody can legally destroy your house, like Rocky's and mine, and Eric's also, legally. Use the word legally. That's got to stop. Thank you.
Just one of the gentlemen said that if we put manure on, I'm Deb Harpenoff from Salix, if we put manure on frozen ground, it is illegal for us to do that. Just so you know, we cannot do that. So my husband and I have 3 different sites that have hog confinement units on them. One of the things that had been discussed at one of the meetings was it was no matter the size of animal units, to possibly change that to absentee owner or factory farm. Would we be considered absentee owners for the sites that we don't live on? Would we be considered a factory farm because we don't live on 2 of the sites? How does that work? I mean, what are you going to do? How does that work? So be very careful with your wording. I ask that you don't even pass this. But you need to be very careful of your wording as to how you affect that, because it's not just the hog confinement units that are going to be affected. If you say factory farms, you're going to dairy, chickens, cattle, everything is going to be affected. And circumvent the animal units, I am very disturbed when that is brought up, because we do not try to circumvent the animal units. The 2,400 head finishers or the 2,400 head nurseries that are going up are industry driven. They're driven across the United States. It's not just Iowa that's putting up 2,400 head units. It's the United States, because of the farrowing units, the amount of pigs that they put out, because of the disease. You can't have 5,000 finishers all on one site, finishing pigs, and not expect to get disease. or you can't have 5,000 nursery pigs. That would be a disaster. You get one PED in there, and then, yeah, you are going to figure out the mortality. But it's industry-driven because of disease, because of PQA+, because of our site assessments that we have to go through, because of our manure management plans that we have to put in. The manure management plans, that's another thing. I mean, where we put our barns, we also have to have a certain amount of land available to put the manure on. So we don't want to put our barns, 5 of them in a row, then we're going to be destroying your roads, trucking our manure other places. So we don't want to, put 5,000 head right on one site so that we can, then we need a certain amount of acres. So I ask that you do not pass this.
And I guess with saying what we're sharing citizen concerns, I mean, now you'd almost have to change the ordinance or resolution to say we also heard significant people come to our meeting and say they don't want us to make any changes. I mean, if you want to represent the voice of the people, I'm getting to the point where, well, I just would rather us either vote it down or vote for it, whatever you guys want to do. But I just think it's inadequate for us to do a resolution saying we're, passing these concerns along to you. If people want to take their concerns directly to their state legislators, I think that would be more appropriate in this instance because it seems quite divided here. I did want to share a story of, this is my 20-year reunion. Went back to Algona with the kids and I showed them just different places. I showed them my grandparents' farm, which I pulled up a picture of overhead if you want to see it, and you can kind of see where it was. I guess I can't put it on the big screen unless there's a way to put a projector on there. I don't think so, but you can see that little triangular, looks like they grow hay there today. That once housed about 50 or 60 hogs. And you see how close it is to the creek in the picture there? They basically crapped right in the creek. And that's about a quarter mile from my grandma's house. And it was pretty overwhelming when the wind was from the east. When I was 20 years old, the individual, and I don't know if you saw it, there's a little CAFO in that lot now. When I drove my kids by that area, not only did it not stink, it was clean. And I think they must have a manure management plan where they disc that into the soil. It was a huge difference from when I was a kid. In fact, you didn't smell a thing at all. And I just remember going out to mow the 3 acres that we mowed. And if the wind was out of the east, we pretty much packed it up and went somewhere else. And that was just 50 or 60 hogs. Now, if there's 1,200 hogs in there and you can't even smell them from the driveway a quarter mile away, I mean, I'm just saying this for reference, CAFOs are a huge advancement from what used to be done just 20 years ago. And that being said, I would like us to vote on the resolution either up or down the way it is. I just think, hearing everyone here today, I mean, it is a 50-50 split of the people in the room. And if you went out, and anybody in the farming industry would tell you the same thing, please don't change it. Anybody living next to it would say the same thing, I don't want it next to me, and I mean, that's what it all gets down to in almost any zoning issue I've had, whether it's in the city or the county, anywhere. Everyone doesn't mind the operation or well, I mean, some people have a problem with the operations on this, but, just people don't want it next to them, and that's, if you want to lobby the state to make changes, I think everyone should just do it individually. If you want to lobby the state to keep it the way it is, I think you should do that individually too. And I just don't know that this is a way that we can fairly pass a resolution that speaks to all the citizens of Woodbury County regardless.
And if I could just respond with one thing. Some of the constituents that I've heard and for which I was able to go out and visit the site, and I hope each one of you have, I hope you've gone out and that you've been able to be responsive to those constituents and look at what they're facing. Along with that, there was that, I mean, sometimes it's the either or, right? You're either going to do this or you're going to overregulate and you're going to declare war on ag or something like that. That's not what I heard from these people. What I heard was, we want transparency. We want to know that there is a lot of the responsible and good folks that have come before us tonight that are engaged in this industry are good and they're transparent and they're honest. But I think that's deserved in every situation and application. Can you regulate that into existence? I don't know. But what I'm saying is, that's not what I'm hearing from people isn't never in my backyard, and it's just as easy as that. We do have planning and zoning and a board of adjustment. I know 3 of you that sit on that respectively. There's a process, and everybody, when I sat on there for a year, most people walked away on either side kind of unhappy on both sides a little bit. Sometimes I don't think that's a bad thing. There are certain conditions, worked it out. This doesn't seem like it's happening in every instance. There are great examples of where it's being done responsibly. But I think those people came to us for a voice. I understand there's equally another side of this in the room, but I just wanted to respond to that. So.
My name's Colt Baldwin. I guess I'd consider myself a young farmer from Anthon, 32 years old, and I guess, have you guys been around any working farms lately? Whether it's livestock or corn, beans, whatever it is. It's tough out there right now to make a living. I mean, there's not much making money. And I mean, if we just keep laying down regulations, where does it start and stop? Today when we were eating in the local cafe, Anthon's a town of 500 people. There's maybe 15 people in there, and every one of them was involved in livestock. So I mean, it's a pretty far-reaching deal, livestock is. It just, I mean, yeah, just because it's not Sioux City doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So I mean, we've got to watch where we start and stop. And right now we're borrowing $1,600 on fat cattle to finish them out, to maybe make 50 bucks or lose 50 bucks. We can't afford for that animal to be mistreated or for the manure to go down the stream, because we need that manure to go back on our ground to grow our crops. So I mean, we're all trying to be good land stewards. But I mean, Jeremy, did you go to any working hog operations that are already going?
No, I wasn't invited out.
Did you ask to be invited anywhere?
No, again,
Why would you not, though?
Asked to be invited out to one of the...
Yes, to go see one, see what they're doing, the practices they're using.
Yeah, again, wasn't asked by...
But I mean, you know, when this is a pretty serious legislation you're trying to send through, why would you not go see someone that's already in a working operation?
Well, and I'm certainly willing to come out. I was invited out by people who are concerned, who had been asking questions, and they hadn't got the answer to those questions.
But I mean, I think everyone here in front of us should go see all this. I mean, how much we do care for our animals, try taking care of our waters, because our kids, I've got a 2-year-old daughter, I sure don't want her getting sick.
Sure.
So, I mean, we're all doing the best we can. So, I mean, that's why I would ask every one of you to go out and talk to a young farmer, see how they're doing, and talk to an operation already in existence for 50 years. I mean, we're all trying to do the right things. So, I mean, I guess that's kind of my 2 cents on the deal.
Is there a consensus among the board to move on from citizen input? One lady's raising her hand. You can.
I just want to say a couple sentences.
Please, still. It's got to be on the record.
Thanks. One of the farms, my farm, is right across from the road from the other. The hog confinement's going up. And my concerns is we had the best water on that farm I was born and raised on, and I want to keep it that way. And yes, I'm renting my farm out to a young farmer this fall, which he's young too, which is great. He can take over for us, that's great. My dad raised cattle and hogs. That's what I'm concerned about. That was the best water out on that farm, and I do not want it contaminated, and I will have it tested, and I will have it on record. Thank you.
Thank you.
First set the record straight. I sent an email to all 5 of you, and he was invited to my farm to look at a hog building, and you did not come here.
You asked by email for me to come out to,
I invited you anytime you wanted to come, all 5 of you, and nobody showed up. You haven't even called the DNR to see what the regulations are. I talked to the DNR office.
Sir, you have to come up if you're going to give a comment. Please make it brief.
Lane Tepke from Mobile. I sent an email to all 5 of you. I don't know if you all read it or not. I invited each and every one of you to come out to my hog operation and see how clean it is, see what we do to raise hogs. I called the DNR office yesterday at 5 minutes to 4, 5 minutes before closing time, to see if any of you had called them to even find out what the regulations are that we go through. Nobody has even investigated it. So how can you vote on something like this? You don't even know what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a consensus of the board now to move on from citizen input?
yes.
Okay. Comments from board members or a motion? I want to thank everyone for coming out to hear from a couple people drove all the way from Danbury is on different sides of the issue. Shows, to Radig's point, how divided this is, but also I'm so appreciative that you would come. In regards to comments that, maybe we all haven't set foot on the property, so to speak, that's why we value your input so much, and we hear and trust you when you give your own testimony. That's good enough for me. The point is well taken that we could get together 60 people to be on this side or that side. There's been so much applause tonight on either side that, even if we wanted to gauge, and it would be unwise in my opinion to gauge from the size of the room or the people that show up, because there is a silent majority in either case, as you may see it. So that point's well taken. And again, I want to thank you all for making your points known. It's a hard decision for this board. Heavy lies the head that wears the tie-breaking vote. I understand the comment about the undertones, and I don't think Supervisor Taylor meant any of his wording as targeting, although unfortunately it's coming across that way to some of you. There have been negative undertones, not from this board. I do respect the comments of this being rushed or this being ginned up and it being somewhat emotional. I oppose all socially destructive groups that may be involved in that. It's not the board of supervisors. It's not myself. I don't think it's the other board members. I think that we do have a responsibility to be responsive to our constituents and raise the question. So I think if this board is brutally honest with itself, this is a feel-good resolution. And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense necessarily. This issue will be taken up by the state. The metrics involved would be debated as it was tonight on a much grander stage, and more input would be received. I ran on transparency, and what I like about this resolution is the emphasis coming from me is on local public hearings. I think there's a transparency aspect to that we have the Board of Adjustment meetings we talked about where no one is, 50% are happy, 50% are unhappy. That's, something Supervisor Taylor and others have dealt with serving in that capacity, and it's a hard choice every time. But I think that the transparency aspect is what speaks to me. I do, as I said before, as a feel-good, as a punt to the state, you know, the reality is that the state will look at the counties that approved, disapproved, took no action, postponed, and in the end, the loudest voices or the most responsive or reasonable voices hopefully would prevail in that case. This is something that has been let to itself for, I think I read 15 years. If this was a couple of years and only a couple of years old, there'd be quite a bit of pause from me. But again, it's a tough decision, but and I very much sympathize with the people that feel targeted, that feel like there's a negative undertone. There's not from this board, and so those are my comments.
If I can ask one of our planning and zoning director. John?
We still don't have a motion, correct?
Correct. You had mentioned at one point a referral to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Do you see, or have you historically had such a referral like that in the past in order to craft something like this?
Although we've not been down the CAFO road, the supervisors in the past have infrequently, but have taken into consideration referring issues to the Zoning Commission to hear similar testimony to this. It's been some time since that's happened. My research indicates that some of the 14 counties that were referred to that have adopted some of this similar resolution language have done that on occasion. I can't say what number of them has, but they've taken the opportunity to do that. All that being said, I don't see what additional input the Zoning Commission could now add to this. Basically, supervisors, boards across the state have used the Zoning Commission to gather information similar to what we've received in multiple meetings before you and bring you a recommendation on what you should do. Then it's your duty to accept that recommendation and do with it what you decide is best. Whether or not you pass this resolution or not tonight or sometime in the future, if you table it, I think the message has been sent to the livestock producers. Citizens are watching. That's healthy. I think it also tells the producers that they are probably tasked with, it would probably be wise if you policed yourself to some degree. If you have a bad steward, maybe you deal with it internally. On the other hand, I just want to send the message to the citizens that have concerns about locations. Although we've sent the message we can't do much about them on a local issue, we are always a referral source to the DNR should some of their current regulations become violated. It sounds like, and I've said this in the past, it sounds like the Planning and Zoning Department in Woodbury County in general can't do anything about these facilities. But I want to reiterate, you all know this, that we do have some things to say what happens in floodplain. We do have some things to say when land divisions occur related to CAFOs. And our various other departments have say on water well placements as well as septic system placements. So there is some oversight. It's just not in the area of the zoning ordinances, and that is, again, as you've heard, because of state legislation. Any questions for the Planning and Zoning Department?
So the football analogy is the backwards lateral, or?
Unfortunately, yes.
Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
I would move the resolution and take any friendly language amendments of any who are concerned about language therein.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there a discussion of language revisions? Is there further discussion from the board? Would the auditor please call the roll?
DeWitt.
No.
Potabom.
Aye.
Raddick.
No.
Taylor.
Aye.
Aye. And the motion passes 3-2. DeWitt and Raddick opposed. Thank you again for all of your input.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank the board for the opportunity to come here and that you are very welcoming. Okay, because my retail dollar depends on welcoming places, and I welcome you up to Okoboji anytime in my Senate district to enjoy yourselves. And I'd even welcome the gentleman from Mobile who smacked me down earlier in the hearing. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Oy vey. It could take a minute now to get it to where you can talk.
Everyone, sorry to interrupt. We do have some remaining items on the agenda, so you're certainly free to talk upstairs in the atrium. We're going to move ahead with our agenda items. Thank you. Item 12 is the chairman's report. For information, item A is the ISAC annual conference that I attended with Supervisor Raddick August 23rd to 25th. We heard from Senator Joni Ernst. In my estimation, not on too many deep topics. We heard from we are trying to continue with our board meeting. This is a continuation of that meeting where you will remember before the last item, it was so quiet to hear a church mouse. I'll turn over the rest to Supervisor Raddick.
What on ISAC? Very good motivational speaker, but most of the other things I think were kind of things we had already talked about or had known, so I was kind of disappointed in meeting content, but I'm trying to think here what...
Agricultural values, we
had the domestic violence, we had what was it, the new zoning issues, there was, yeah, I mean, most everything that was discussed is stuff we've already discussed in our open meetings here, so, or, you know, the 911 towers, those kind of things that we're already on board here in Woodbury County, so that was kind of like a past tense meeting for us. So, yeah, I guess other than hearing our senator and the speaker there, I would say most of it was kind of a review.
And it was the first time they moved to an annual sort of conference rather than spring and fall. So I think the next one focuses more on legislation and where it would otherwise be spread into two different conferences. Auditor Gill was there as well, attended a meeting on with his affiliate. Do you have any comments?
One of the more interesting ones that I attended was on the security issue, but actually there was nothing different than what was already discussed. They were interested in what occurred in Woodbury County, but there was no news to report on.
Move on to item B. Historical Committee attended today with Supervisor Taylor. This was a very productive meeting where we received some promotional prints that the committee agreed to purchase the rights to. We discussed volunteers. We discussed possible funding for speakers. We discussed updates on the audio tours of the courthouse, which hopefully will last beyond the time of the celebration and usefulness. And Supervisor Taylor, who chairs the committee, might have further comments.
Yeah, I think we're moving the ball downfield, and I think it's very good. We are going to have a sort of a budget picture next time, and we have 50 of the prints being made up. Rex Mueller, our new police chief, is working with an artist from Akron on a centennial poster, as well as looking at different ways to conduct the tours that I think will be very technologically savvy and useful to the public. So I'm excited about it, and we'll bring you more.
Very good. Are there any reports on committee meetings?
Mr. Chair, we had a Safety and Security Committee meeting. As you know, in your absence at ISAC, Supervisor DeWitt attended. We did get a request for bids for camera and cable installation for LEC, Trosper Hoyt, and the courthouse. We had a good vociferous discussion on Chapter 356.7 and monies that can be used for safety and security. We shared that the best use or process for that is during the annual budget time. So we'll look at those one-time costs. Those were approximately, again, $60,000. Did bring up what this board had asked, which was the county policies regarding county buildings and the recent court order. There was the question about courthouse security and the disarming applying to law enforcement, and Judge Hoffmeyer shared that that would be really under the discretion of the sheriff's office to implement, and he referenced that portion of the court order alluding to that. And so it sounded from the sheriff's office that personal business, from what we are understanding, would be something like a court case or jury duty for which they would be asked to disarm, not routine business like the marriage license and so on. So that's the overview of that. We did ask about special circumstances in which one's an employee and an elected official, and also asked about if this would apply to judges, and the answer was that the court order would, including both on-body or off-body carry, as the state has protocol for its own state employees, even though they reside within the courthouse. So I think that that would be an agreed upon.
We got some clarification. I was more comfortable when we were done, you know, that we had actually accomplished something, I thought, and aired out some differences, if you will, and had some disagreements possibly on the avenues that were taken as far as language and talking to each other, but regardless, I still think we made progress, and I think we're in a better place with the advisory letter.
Any other comment? Any other?
And then the only other thing was that there was a discussion of adding bodies or FTEs for the courthouse security without adding a cost. In other words, the available pool would become larger, but not necessarily the positions. So that was the only
In
other
your previous agenda item on this, you mentioned how would the judge's order and what it means be communicated to the public in light of the clarification, or I don't know how clear it is at this point, but do you think that has been communicated at this point, or do you think it warrants another board discussion? I guess, are you satisfied with how the public has been apprised of the judge's order locally?
I think if the media picked up on it, it would help to get that message out if there is confusion. But I don't see anybody with the appetite to stick around past 7:15. I think at the door, it'll probably be clear, I would think, to any law enforcement that's coming in, whether or not your instructions would be for them to disarm, if you had a desire for them to be disarmed.
Yeah, they would be asked what their purpose, why they were there, out of uniform, whether they were carrying, what the reason they'd be in the courthouse for.
It
And then the decision.
possibly somewhat up to courthouse security discretion, but ultimately the sheriff's discretion with him, under his guidance, yeah, advice, whatever, but it's,
So if they said they were there to shoot somebody, you would not let them take that in?
depends.
I don't know how clear, I mean, I know the sheriff's office is very easy to be clear about what the sheriff's office interprets or wants, as well as the board has. But we asked for clarification from the judge what he meant, because the majority of the board read it and felt that personal time means basically off-duty time. And I don't know if walking away with two particular cases where it would not be allowed, court case or jury duty, is sufficient for that. And I know from what I heard, the judge was not particularly happy about being questioned further on that. It's just odd to ask the judge what he meant and for the judge to say, I mean whatever the sheriff's office interprets. So I think we need to come to grips with what the flexibility that's inherent in that order, which we of course all took as set in stone, whatever the intent may be. I'm still curious exactly what the judge meant. And I think if the answer doesn't come from the judge, then we're all up to interpretation, and it's whoever has the potential to fulfill the order is the most wise in their interpretation, and I don't think that's a reasonable understanding. I think he punted, in other words, somewhat like we did with our resolution. So the board has to decide if they're okay with that, or if it warrants further discussion. It's a good position to be in when you can say, I obey all court orders, and the court says my order means what you want it to.
What I want it to.
That's all I'm saying.
You look like you want to talk, Major Wick. No? I didn't know if you had. I guess my thinking on this is, I mean, we've all had and shared our opinions, and you know where mine is as far as court orders versus everything else. I think the practical effect of this is much better than what I thought it was going to be. And by that I mean I don't like the idea of a police chief or somebody otherwise being disarmed who's in law enforcement.
Oh, I agree.
And so I think that this is good, the practical effect of saying this is the way it's going to be treated. I would much rather have somebody in law enforcement stay armed, because I don't think it makes us any safer to disarm them. And it sounds like that's the practical effect of this, except where that law enforcement officer is going up to his child's custody case, in which I don't think it's a good idea. So I don't know if I like the whole process. I mean, all of this isn't ideal. But I think the practical effect of it is better than it once was. I don't know if that's a good way of saying it or not, but
I guess I'm glad that, because I agree with the examples you gave. I guess we can just say that practically, if you want to say practically or some other word, practically refusing portions of the court order as it regards personal time practically makes sense. But I don't think that it jives with an assertion that it's being followed according to the board's understanding. And until we are advised by the judge that he did not mean what he wrote, then that's our understanding. We can't necessarily have another security committee meeting that goes as the last one did. So you say practically, I understand the practical implications, but the clarification did not come from the judge. It came from the interpretation given to another. And that's an interesting way to write court orders.
I mean, I think you were there, right? Not to put you all on the spot, but I have a faulty memory at times. I think the other thing we could do is ask the Judge Hoffmeyer if he'd be willing to clarify that within the order. I mean, that's
what happened, I'm told, at the security committee. I mean, that was the reason for consensus of the board to move ahead with the security committee meeting, is to ask the judge what that meant. Is that incorrect?
Right, and I think he said it's at the discretion of the sheriff, and the sheriff said, well, this is how I'm going to implement it. So if we want that to ultimately be a request from Judge Hoffmeyer to delineate and differentiate.
No, he's already given it by giving it to the sheriff's office. I understand that. I understand the practical effects. I'm just saying the interpretation was not based on the wording. It was based on the understanding and different effects and a personal case of a court case versus attending a historical committee meeting. If you just read the order, how would you know which one of those is implied? Because, as I said, just because the orders get longer doesn't mean they get any more.
Well, there was a statement made that it's eventually going to go to court, but or end up in court and get a decision that way, probably from the Supreme Court, I would guess, but kind of a wag on my part.
So again, I understand the practicality of saying what it means lies with the sheriff's office. But again, that's our question was to the judge. But I don't think asking again will do any good.
Not gonna.
Well, I'll report back on the region next week, and I'll have an update for you on the Plymouth County Supervisor and myself engaging the district. So, and no, you cannot take my spot on the region, Supervisor DeWitt, when you get that gleam in your eye when I mention the word region. So, just wanted to let you know.
Okay.
Other committee reports? Are there any citizen concerns?
I have one. A citizen reported to Michelle that we're required each year to put salaries in the paper earnings by county employees, and There was a concern voiced that Supervisor Ong earned $70,000 that was reported in the paper, and Michelle went back and looked at what we had supplied to the Journal, and we indeed had supplied the correct information to them, but in a formatting error, you were reported to have earned $61,000.
You got a bigger raise than we thought, huh?
That's all I need is a reporting error to be immortalized and.
Michelle, can you, did you talk to the Journal then?
I did email the Journal, and I called the Journal and asked them to republish it with the correct format. What happened is we have the employee and the salary, and somehow in their formatting, some of the salaries ended up underneath the employee's name. Some of it was next to the employee's name, and by the end of the list, it was side by side with the wrong employee. So, so the beginning is correct, but as you read through it and if you look at it.
So it's corrected for all time?
Well, it's correct in our records. We submitted it correct to the Journal. It was just when they reformatted it to publish it, it was put out incorrectly. So I haven't heard back from them yet.
So their retraction will be on page 42 of section E.
Well, I asked for it to be on the front page. Darned if you do, darned if you don't.
Great. Well, was that just me or was that anybody else?
That was the one that apparently drew the attention of a citizen.
Yeah,
And the citizen was upset because they thought I made over 60,000.
Well, he questioned me as to why, and I said, well, he doesn't, because I knew what the salary was.
Right.
And he
So he
said,
works
well,
that much
that's what
harder.
it said, and so I went back and looked at our files, and I said, well, he must have been reading offline until I saw the proof of publication with the actual copy from the Journal. That's when I realized what had happened.
So just me.
No, not just
Okay.
you. You're just the one
Just
that he
those
knew.
Everyone below
so
you.
He was looking up all of the
You
board
were
members.
being
and,
last in the alphabet.
yes,
Okay.
You're towards the end. I think he was actually looking at all the board members.
You and Wick probably.
Probably, yes.
You want to trade, Wick?
We have some reserves that probably are listed making about $100,000, so
Want to
maybe
get in that
only make $1
reserve
or so.
program?
Okay, well, thank you for calling the Journal. Hopefully they,
They will correct,
okay.
and we will get proof of that.
Tell the constituent, that's not true. I'm not rolling in money.
I will.
Okay. Thanks, Pat.
I knew you'd appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great.
If you make that kind of money, do you need an assistant?
All my friends want it already.
I have one concern as of now. Out in the country, we have it's a great place to live. We have a lot of people that want to move out to the country. We have a lot of industry coming into Sioux City and some of the surrounding areas, which is probably going to put another drain on the ag land that we have because of people wanting to move out in the country and have their acreages. I didn't research it much, but would we be able to take another look at the zoning regulations with regards to acreages, where they are placed, the amount of acres? I'm thinking put a 10-acre minimum or a 20-acre minimum to be able to build an acreage on it. I think, like we look in the fall when we harvest and we have our grain dryers going, we might get a call from a neighbor and saying, how long is that going to run? And we just have to tell them it's going to run until the corn is dry, and then we have to cool it off a little bit. Sometimes they're not very happy. Those are the things that we're running into out there. If you remember, the U.S. Senate had a file number that originated out of Illinois where people with a combine upset the neighbors, and it got all the way to the U.S. Senate in a file number that dust leaving their farm was polluting the air. They wanted them to control their dust. So, is there a possibility we could revisit those zoning ordinances with regards to the amount of acres?
I think the process for doing so would be through the Planning and Zoning Commission, making a recommendation on to this board. And it's one of the reasons I really, and I mean this, is sometimes some of the work there can be dry, but I like the process because you have constituent representatives and that quasi-judicial, commission, but they really take that input, and I think they do their job very seriously, so.
So my next step would be to visit with John.
Right, and then to approach their board, and then they would ultimately have a recommendation.
Okay.
Because we really don't act outside of one of their recommendations, so.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
And I appreciated your input tonight, I really did, so thanks, Lou.
You guys did a good job. Can't satisfy everybody.
All right.
Appreciate it. Any other citizen concerns? Any other board concerns?
I do have a concern on, 9C that we voted on today. Basically is a change total amount in the budget of about $515,000, so over $500,000, because we had budgeted $826,000. We're now looking at a project of $1.1 million, added the $12,000, and then we still got to add the management fee of $126,000 or $165,000. So we're going to be robbing from a different CIP project for this. So I guess I'd kind of like to see some kind of financial analysis of what we're looking at.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I think that
There's been other projects that have run under, which make
but
up
not
for this.
$500,000 under, right?
Less critical projects will be used for this.
Right.
So
I guess I'd just like
reason-
to see what Peter, James, which parcel we're robbing for fall.
I think that's a good point as far as some sort of running estimate to.
Yeah, I mean, in any case, it should be tracked. I know it's going to save a lot of money over time. But when we began the CIP process and got a new building services director, a lot of the CIP line items were a wish list.
Right.
So much was not done, and so.
I get all that. I just like to know where we're taking it from. And then you can tell football season's upon us with all the analogies here, but I thought made me think maybe we should get like the Seattle Noisometer back here for meetings like today. But go Hawks. That's what I wanted to end it on.
Okay.
Saturday nights, the Huskers against the Razorbacks.
What?
The Journometer.
Oh, Journometer? All right, it's reached critical mass, so we are adjourned. Thank you.